Welcome in to Check the Mic. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. We're live on YouTube. Happy Mock Draft Monday. Happy St. Patty's Day, Sam. Big day here today.
Big day. Mock Draft Monday and Patty's Day. Perfect.
Yeah. You do anything special? It's your day.
No.
It's your day. Come on. We gotta talk.
I sent you that
big
thing,
deal.
right? The Garen Noon thing where he's like, we don't, Irish people don't, it's not that big a deal.
It's not a thing. Yeah.
Like, you guys in America have kind of lost the run of yourselves a bit, dying the Chicago River Green, all that kind of stuff. Like for it to be like appropriately Irish, it would have to be a little bit crappy, like the budget for this thing would have to be like €45. It's a bit half-assed, like things falling off it. Like that's proper Irish.
That's how you make it Irish?
Yeah.
All right. You gonna stop by Skyline for their green noodles today?
No, I won't.
Those are they're green noodles over at
that
Skyline.
That would definitely fall into the category of like, forfeit dare things that we've done for like punishments. Like I wouldn't eat that voluntarily.
Oh my gosh. That's a horrible one to bring up.
Uh-huh.
I'm resigned to the fact that we're not going to get Skyline as a sponsor, so I'm okay trashing their food.
They're like the one brand we're perfectly okay with just ripping to pieces.
I'm okay not endorsing that as nonsense. I apologize because we're about to get a bunch of Bengals fans rolling in here as we report the news. But the native Cincinnatians, they love their Skyline.
There's some good things about being around Cincinnati. The chili is not one of them.
It's not one of them. All right, so we got a big day today. We're going to do our mock draft post-free agency. You and I working as co-GMs here, going team by team. Every team has their first-round pick, so it's great. More engagement, all 32 fan bases. But first, we got to talk about the Cincinnati Bengals overnight or late night. They officially extended Ja'Marr Chase and T. Higgins. I believe James Rappian, Bengals beat reporter. I believe he had it first before everybody. Before Jordan Schultz had it exclusive. Well,
wow, because apparently the receivers told Jordan Schultz, like they fed him the info, was the tweet that I saw.
I believe James had it hours earlier, but again,
he beat the receivers to it.
I believe so.
Nice.
So yeah, they got to Jordan Schultz. They must have Starbucks for life or something like that to go. They went right to Jordan. Bengals extend Ja'Marr Chase and T. Higgins, 4 years, $161 million for Chase, 4 years, $115 million for T. Higgins. Kudos to both James and Jordan for the reporting because that's important. And this is look, it's a big deal. We didn't know what was going to happen with Cincinnati officially, but they have both receivers locked up. GM Joe Burrow, a major feather in his cap for the GM here.
Yeah, nice work, Joe.
This is when you respond to the news that Ja'Marr Chase and T. Higgins have been extended by the Bengals.
So now we're going to have a nuanced conversation because people either think it's genius or it's idiotic. And obviously the truth is somewhere in the middle. It's going to be a fascinating case study because they are now, like in NFL history, this is the team with the most money tied up in wide receivers ever, right? Now, I don't know if that's true in a percentage term of the cap. I haven't fact-checked that part, but it's basically as much money as anybody's tied up in two wide receivers before. What's fascinating to me is, so Higgins is done for under $30 million a year APY. Now, look, these are just the headline figures. We've been through this all week before, right? We don't know what the actual structure of the deal looks like yet.
Right.
But generally, T. Higgins being done for under $30 million as the headline figure a year actually feels like pretty good business to me. I thought he would have been pushing above that given where the marketplace was. But the one that jumps out is we are over $40 million a year for Ja'Marr Chase. Remember a year ago, Justin Jefferson signed his deal for $35 million a year. So in that time, the salary cap has jumped 9-point-something%. And the top wide receiver headline figure has gone up 17%. So that jumps out as a little bit over the top. Jason Fitzgerald from Over the Cap tweeted at me last night. He's like, the Bengals, like they made a rod for their own back because they were the ones talking about best paid non-quarterback. That was the thing that they kind of made a deal of. And unfortunately, that sort of failed to see a bunch of defensive deals coming down the pike, like the Myles Garrett deal, right? If they'd simply been saying, yeah, best paid receiver, no problem, then all we got to do is beat Justin Jefferson's deal plus whatever sort of ego is required for Jamar Chase to beat Justin Jefferson. Like, what's the appropriate amount? But when you start saying best paid non-quarterback, well, all of a sudden, Myles Garrett's deal comes along and puts $5 million on the tag.
Right.
That part is interesting. But I think, look, we've had this conversation before. I don't think it is a fundamentally crazy idea to dedicate a ton of money to your top two wide receivers. Let me throw that at you. And how would you return that serve?
I agree. I agree with that. I don't think it's a crazy idea. What we've described before is you have the one quarterback, the Burrow, the Allen, the Mahomes, Lamar, whoever it is, one guy you know is going to make a ton of money. There's your quarterback. You got him locked up. And for the most part, you have 3 or 4 other positions you can pay the funny money to. And so you have to choose where that goes. And remember with Kansas City at one point, it was Chris Jones, but also Frank Clark, and then Jawan Taylor. Like they're moving that around. Who is their $20 million plus guy? Now it's getting up to $30 million plus.
Right.
And so choosing wide receiver 1 absolutely makes sense. The difference, I think, for Cincinnati is instead of it being a tackle, I mean, Orlando Brown's making good money, but not this level. Instead of being a tackle or a defensive end, as of right now, it's wide receiver 2. But it's, to me, it's not just wide receiver 2. This isn't like Corey Davis a couple of years ago. No offense to the great Corey Davis. He was like the quintessential wide receiver 2, right? If you have an A.J. Brown on one side, Corey Davis will have a nice little season. Intermediate route runner, not a deep threat, not great after the catch, just okay. It's not just another wide receiver 2. It's a high-end wide receiver 2 and a guy that half the league probably thought was wide receiver 1 for them. So the idea that these guys are together for the foreseeable future, the chemistry that they already have, that foundation's in place. And now Cincinnati, outside of, okay, who's our best wide receiver 3 year in, year out, and just kind of staying young and cheap with the rest of your receiving core, you know what you're getting into here. So I think it's perfectly fine. The bigger questions are about maybe T. Higgins specifically, some of his injury concerns, the time that he's missed. But I think having these guys out on the field, I don't see them getting older and regressing or anything. I think you've got this incredible nucleus in your passing game. And now obviously you have to make sure that the O-line is crept back toward average every year. And of course the defense has to, you have to hit on some draft picks on the defensive side of the ball. But I don't think it's crazy to have QB, wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 as your foundation.
Yeah. Look, so like some people are out there portraying this as like a fundamental mistake of team building, right? Like it's a stupid thing you do when you're constructing Madden and you're just throwing money at your good players and blah, 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 right? But nobody, I don't think, would complain about signing Jamar Chase. Now, maybe they might, again, quibble the same way I did with the money, right? Should Jamar Chase be that much more, 17% more than Justin Jefferson? I think that's a fair argument to make. But conceptually, I don't think anybody is complaining about the idea that you lock up Jamar Chase long term, right? That's just what you should do. So really, it comes down to, given that you have Jamar Chase in the building, do you lock up T. Higgins as well, right? Yes or no? That is what people have a problem with. Now, the two things I would say is, number one, they're repped by the same person, and that almost certainly played a part in this negotiation. So if you're Cincinnati and you're trying to get this deal done, can you even get a deal done with Jamar Chase if you don't get T. Higgins done as well? That's question number one for the people being like, this is stupid, right? This is dumb management. This is bad team building. Could you have actually gotten one deal done without the other, given that they are repped by the same agent, regardless of what's going to be said now, right? Because who would put that out publicly? Yes, of course, we were like blackmailing them and, bending them over a barrel and making sure both deals were done. They're not going to say that out loud now, but that may have been the case. So point number one. Point number two, as you said, it's like there's a difference between starting from a blank sheet of paper and like optimally distributing the money where you would want it to go, which would be quarterback first, top wide receiver, Jamar Chase, top pass rusher, Trey Hendrickson. And then I think your next two would be best offensive lineman and best defensive back, I think, right? That's where an optimal team construction strategy would be, distributing the money around. But nobody starts from that. Nobody starts from the blank sheet of paper. You're always starting from this fluid roster that's a movable thing year on year. You're right. The Bengals have a reasonable amount of money tied up in Orlando Brown, but not like crazy money. The where this is taking money from, though, is right now the highest cap charge for a Bengals cornerback is $4 million, right? So they don't have a cornerback earning anything at the moment. So that's where this money is. Instead of paying CB1, and they're going to, hope that one of these guys emerges and that's not a problem area, that this money's going to T. Higgins instead, right? Which, number one, I think that would be wide receiver 2 would be like the next on my list in that optimal world anyway. Like once I'd gotten those, quarterback, wide receiver 1, pass rusher 1, offensive lineman 1, cornerback 1, the next position to me would probably be wide receiver 2 or like, receiver 2, whoever my next best receiver is, if he's a top level guy, that's where I would want the money going. So they pulled it from like, position 5 to position 6, which is a reasonable place to go. The only question being, all right, now how do we repair a defense that was garbage last year? Like that's the issue. But like what you're asking to do, if you're saying don't do this deal, is take the money that you gave T. Higgins and throw it at defenders in free agency. And okay, could you have gotten Trevarius Ward? Would that have been a better allocation of money? Maybe, but I don't think. Again, it's not like egregious stupidity.
No, I agree. And by the way, you can look, and maybe it's rosy colored because I kind of like both players and like the way they were progressing. You can look at Dax Hill and DJ Turner,
right,
as two pretty good corner options here. Dax Hill had moved to corner and was looking good there before his injury. DJ Turner was much improved in year 2 before his injury, got hurt in a game where he was lights out against the Chargers. So you could easily say, yeah, they're fine. They're okay at that particular spot. Not okay, but, not perfectly fine. But like, hey, they've got, a couple young guys, first and second round picks that could be okay. The one thing, so Cincinnati's broken stride a little bit the last few years from what they like to do, right? Which is spend this big money, do different stuff with Joe Burrow in the building. The next thing, as a team that I believe has 6 draft picks going in this year, that's how I think you have to complement this roster with volume drafting, which is something Cincinnati doesn't generally do. They don't do a whole bunch of maneuvering around the draft. I would love to see them go from 6 to 9 or 10 picks in one of these years, because you have to attack the defensive line in volume. Parts of the secondary probably definitely, I would say need that depth. Offensive line in volume. The one last thing I'll say, the people that are criticizing this, saying you don't go receivers before you have the trenches sorted, it does feel like the 2021 Penei Sewell Jamar Chase conversation, where I believe the Bengals have proven that Jamar Chase was perfectly fine as the pick over Penei Sewell. They made it to a Super Bowl, almost won a Super Bowl. They've had an elite offense when these guys have been healthy, despite not having a good offensive line. So we have learned that. Like, would I want Joe Burrow getting hit the way he does and having to, be under pressure the way he has for the majority of his career? No, but they still have an elite offense here. And you can't say, well, he's been hurt. Like his wrist injury had nothing to do with the offensive line. I mean, you don't like QBs don't get hurt because they have a bad offensive line. It's mostly luck. Now you don't want them getting hit. I mean, sometimes they do, but it's not like this extra 3% of pressure was the thing that
it's not
got you
1-to-1.
Right. Exactly. So make sure the context is there when people quote tweet me like I'm an idiot. So that's my thing. Like you're paying for the known here, which is, I know we're going to have a really good offense. Even if we do screw up the offensive line, we're still going to have a good offense. That's the history here for Cincinnati.
The other thing, by the way, so the defense was terrible last year, like awful. So on the one hand, you're looking at this and saying, well, they've done very, very little to a defense that was utterly atrocious last year. Like, that doesn't look good on paper. On the other hand, it shouldn't have been anywhere near as bad as it was a year ago. This was largely the same group that was good before that, right? Like, it fell apart randomly with no particular logic to it. Lou Anarumo got fired at the end of it. There are defenses that if you simply, like, there's value to just changing the coach, right? So I would kind of expect this group to be better next year, even if they didn't add anybody to it. And there's still the draft to come. We're about to do a mock draft. Who knows what defenders they may get? You know what I mean? Like, they haven't finished the offseason. They can still add players to this defensive group that they're not prohibited from that because they signed these 2 receivers. So, but even if they didn't add anybody, I would expect the defense to be better than it was a year ago. And even with the defense as bad as it was, you can argue the thing that kept them out of the playoffs was the one game the offense didn't show up, right? The offense didn't show up right at the start of the season against the Patriots randomly, right? Lost a game. And it's like, oh, maybe the Patriots are actually better than we thought they were. The answer is no. The Patriots were, in fact, cheeks, but the Bengals offense didn't show up for that one game. That one game ends up being the game that doesn't get them into the postseason, right? So as bad as the defense was last year, you could argue that the one game the offense didn't show up was the thing that stopped them getting in the postseason. And if they'd made the postseason, who knows what this team could have done given the way this offense was cooking. Again, I think it's a perfectly defensible position to say we are not screwing with that three-way weapon that we have on offense with Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase, particularly given two of them are represented by the same agent. Let's keep the nucleus together and let's work out the rest with whatever we have left over.
Last thing before we get to this all-important mock draft post-free agency style, the question about they should have done this earlier and get the money out there earlier. I think it's a fair point. The one counterpoint for T, like Chase wasn't egregious, but he was drafted the same year as Devontae Smith, right?
Yeah.
The same year. Devontae got re-signed much earlier.
Smith was wasn't Smith the year before? Smith's in the Waddle year and the Jefferson year, right?
Was he?
I don't think so.
Did I screw that up? I mean, it wasn't like egregiously late
no.
On Jamar Chase.
Again, like the comp is Justin Jefferson, right? He was drafted the year after Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson was the last like blockbusting contract. Jefferson was also wanting his money a year early, right? Like this is the thing.
No,
Chase
Devontae,
has been
same year, by the way, 2021
for
Devontae.
Okay, when did he get done?
Eagles got him. They got him early, like a year early, basically.
Right, but that's the thing, right? The Eagles pay their guys early relative to the rest of the league. The Bengals didn't drag their ass on this. The Bengals just did it the way everybody else does it, and it looks bad because the Eagles got it done early. Jefferson is the comp because Jefferson was the year before and was the last guy to be like top of the market. Jefferson also wanted his money a year early. And remember, they had that thing with the Vikings. The Vikings wanted to get his deal done. They didn't get the deal done. They said, well, let's park it for the season. And I think they ended up signing him later that actual season. They didn't park it until the next offseason. They got him done in like late October, November or something. But so that's the gap, right? It's like the Vikings with the same guy in the same conversation got their deal done basically last October, November, as opposed to letting it go now. But letting it go now is like the normal timetable. The Bengals didn't like this is not a Dallas Cowboys thing where they've dragged this thing out until the last possible moment. And it's like, oh no, look what that did. Chase has basically been done along the normal timetable. The one to criticize is T. Higgins, where they franchise tagged him twice now, only to give him the big deal and been hamstrung in the negotiations because he now has the same agent as Jamar Chase. Like this did not need to be an interconnected problem. The Bengals created an interconnected problem by how long they dithered with T. Higgins, which also, by the way, like if they'd done this a year or two ago with T. Higgins, Joe Burrow's voice wouldn't have been like chirping around in the back. Like all the problems, like the ancillary issues with this negotiation are all because they dragged it out with T. Higgins.
Maybe, but also the money that they ended up, we gotta get moving. But the money they end up giving T. Higgins, I also wonder if he would have wanted more even a year ago. As the receivers started creeping up past 30, don't you think he could have said, "Hey, I'm going to hit free agency. I'm going to be wide receiver 1 for a lot of teams. I'm going to be up over 30." I don't know if T. Higgins is that much cheaper, and I think the agent thing may have worked in their favor, where they were more motivated to get a deal done for Cincinnati and to be together for the foreseeable future. It may have worked.
I don't know. The other thing, by the way, I kicked this around as an idea previously. I've since checked it out with some notable cap experts. The people that say like sign your guys early, it's cheaper. It probably isn't for high-end stars because those guys, because they've signed early and they signed for the team-friendly deal because that looks great in a year or two's time, they come back to the table earlier. So you end up basically paying the same money anyway. It looks good for a while. You win the PR battle, but you don't win financially necessarily.
That was the point I was making. I think we're going to see more of that. I think we're going to see more star players. Like what's AJ Brown is still
right. So the point that was made
AJ?
To me is this guy said essentially, if the guy is good enough that the deal looks cheap long term, he's going to come back to the table for more money, and you don't save money by getting them done early. The only way you actually save money is if the guy is not quite good enough that the cheap deal looks cheap. You know what I mean? Like, he has to be only average, where it probably ends up working out in your favor anyway. If he's actually good enough that it's a team friendly deal, the guy comes back to the table for more money, and you didn't save anything by getting him done early. It just looked like it for a couple of years.
And you may have for like a period of time. But again, I think Cincinnati also, they had cheaper hits this year with Higgins on, with Chase making almost nothing and Higgins just on the tag. AJ Brown's at $32 million a year. I mean, if a couple more guys leapfrog him, he comes back and says, hey, well, I'm only at $32 million a year. I want to be closer to 40, right? I mean, this is, so again, I think over time, earlier is still better, but it is not this egregious, everybody has to do it exactly how the Eagles do it, because they're maneuvering cap 5-6 years in advance that other teams don't want to deal with. They don't want to have to deal with that. Right. So I still think the Eagles' way of understanding the time value of money and how much they need to spend later versus now, I get that. They do a great job with that. But not every team, it's not this egregious strategy to, not copy them,
well,
tit for tat.
Getting it done, like getting your contract signed, getting your players locked up a year in advance, I don't think is necessarily the genius move, the cheat, the hack that it seems to be. But I think the contrast is that versus what the Cowboys do, right? And like drag it out until the last. That's bad. The Cowboys, like signing these guys at the last possible second, where they have genuinely pushed the price up beyond sensible figures. That is bad strategy. I have no problem saying the Eagles' strategy is definitely better than that, but I don't think the Eagles' strategy of signing guys a year in advance is necessarily cheaper than guys that do it at the normal timetable, because they don't get guys coming back to the table as quickly. Like it balances out. The Eagles save money quickly, like in years 2 or 3, but then in year 4, the guy wants a new deal and they end up paying more. So it probably resets.
Yes, for those just tuning in, Bengals re-signed Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. We're talking about it not just because it's Bengal news. This is team building news. This is the discussion. This is what we like the most. Team building discussions. Should they have? Should they not have? Should they have waited? That's the fun part about all this. We just talked about the Bengals, but we talked about the strategy of signing 2 receivers versus doing something else. That's what we just talked about for 20 minutes. That's what we do here on Check the Mic. All right, we do have to get to our mock draft. We have 32 picks to get through here, Sam. In the past weeks, we went back and forth. Today, we worked together as co-GMs, and we always like to preface this. We can, cheat a little bit and say this is a predictive mock. It could be what we would do. It could be predictive. It could be whatever we want it to be. It could just be a thought exercise. I think they're all thought exercises, Sam. Put them out there. Think about this. Think about it. This could happen. They're all thought exercises. That's all these mock drafts are. So post-free agency mock draft, Titans are at the top. We could go pretty quick here, I think. But you ready to go?
Yeah. And as usual, my eyes may wander because I have to look over here to a different thing in order to operate the mock draft sim itself.
You don't need to apologize. My eyes are wandering because all my information
is over here. I'm simply explaining.
Yeah, my information's all on the 2 screens over here. By the way, I'm addicted to monitors right now. I got monitors everywhere now. It's like people getting more tattoos. They're addicted. I got monitors everywhere now. I got my 3rd monitor. It was supposed to go in our new office, and I don't think I'm going to ever bring it in. I'm going to keep it here. The home office. Monitors everywhere. Okay. Titans at 1. Are we going Cam Ward?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, nothing in free agency changed my opinion on that, right?
Yeah, if anything, I think it reinforced. Yeah, not even they were rumored to be in on guys like Zach Wilson or Mac Jones as these bridge type of quarterbacks, or maybe second chance type of quarterbacks. I'm not saying they would ever be the future, but if they were going to be out on Cam Ward and in on Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, I think they would have gone with a non-Will Levis option at quarterback. So I'm going to say they're going Cam Ward at number 1 overall.
Yeah, same. I don't believe that anything they did in free agency changes that plan. I think that's where they're going. I think it's the most sensible way out of this. And there's no, if they weren't doing that, you would think there's some kind of viable bridge option above and beyond Will Levis. Cause I don't think this Callahan led team can stomach another year of Will Levis, whether or not that's the long-term plan. I think he would lose his goddamn mind if he had to watch another 17 games of Will Levis doing meme plays.
Yeah, I don't think they want to go with Will Levis there. Also, I will say the offensive line additions for the Titans, that those aren't specific to any quarterback, but that's a nice. They're very much in creep back toward average or better territory now, bringing in guys like Kevin Zeitler, Dan Moore. The money aside, because he'll just go play football. Money aside, they look like they're in much better shape. Moving J.C. Latham to the right side should be a much improved offensive line for the presumed number 1 overall pick, Cam Ward. All right, man. Here we go. Cleveland Browns at number 2. I think a little over a month out from the draft, I still don't know what they're going to do here. There's not enough smoke that they're taking Shedeur Sanders for
the
me.
Draft starts at 2.
It kind of does. I mean, I'm still of the mind. I mean, we said we didn't do trades last week or whatever, but if anyone's going to trade up, I still believe it's the Giants. But they're waiting on Aaron Rodgers, so who the heck knows?
So do we want to make this as the first trade spot in our mock drafts? Because I kind of agree that a trade is going to happen. I don't know that the Titans will move out of 1, but this I could see the Browns getting at it too.
I just don't know if anyone. Are we saying for Shedeur here, or for
it kind of has to be, right? I mean, Cam Ward's gone.
I know you're into.
Here's the thing, right? We keep saying this, like that Shedeur clearly has a wide range of opinions on him. This notion of a gap between him and Cam Ward, of a slide post combine, of the league souring on him and him turning teams off and blah blah blah, it may all be accurate, but again, it has yet to be reflected in any kind of slide down the consensus draft board. Like, we are not seeing this reset of Shedeur being put further and further down big boards, all these things. Like, we're not seeing any kind of public reflection of this slide in his stock.
I think it's not showing in the look. I love the consensus board. I think it's a little slow to move. And I think that's why. And I still believe teams are, people are saying, well, the Browns still need a quarterback. And look, to repeat something I've said before, coming out, you're right. The reason why it's not reflected in the consensus is because a week after the combine, we saw mock drafts that said Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, Jackson Dart, 1, 2, 3. And then we see other mocks where Shedeur Sanders is going like 21 to the Steelers. So some people have diverged and some people haven't. Some people went the other way and said, Jackson Dart, come on down. And other people said Shedeur Sanders moved down the other way, down the lower into the first round. So I think that's why it hasn't shown necessarily on a consensus board. I still feel like you're in. We're going to do our QB rankings either this week or next week, and so we're into this a little bit. I like Shedeur Sanders. I think he's fine. I could easily see people pairing him with Jackson Dart though, and in like a not. You can see what Cam Ward can do from a potentially special standpoint. And I don't know if I'm predicting evaluators now. I don't know if evaluators are going to see that enough in Shedeur Sanders to say, absolutely got to have him at 2. I think they're going to put him closer to Jackson Dart, who, by the way, I also don't think is special, but I think you're going to pair them closer together with Cam Ward getting the bump for look what this guy can do with his arm and his legs.
It's kind of like, it's a little bit like Burrow versus Herbert if you flip the offenses that they were on, right? Like if Herbert had led one of the most explosive offenses in college football history and Joe Burrow had been on, an offense that actually had some problems and was undermining him in various spots, like that's kind of the discussion here, where Cam Ward clearly has the physical advantage everywhere on Shedeur Sanders. He's got a better arm. He's more athletic, though he's not special athletic, I don't think. He's not, in the Lamar Jackson, like Jaden Daniels kind of bucket. He's one up from Shedeur, definitely, but he's got the advantage across the board. Whereas Shedeur's thing is, and he had a better offense around him effectively because Colorado's offensive line was painfully terrible. But Shedeur's advantage is, I think he's the most accurate quarterback in this class. I think generally speaking, his decision making is pretty good. in terms of when he throws the football. The guy's got a career 1.7% turnover-worthy play rate. That's really, really good, like incredibly good. He's never been above 2.1% in any season of his college career. And I think when he's kept clean, his play is extremely good. Now, he takes some, so the lack of general physical, ironically, for a kid of Deion Sanders, like the greatest athlete maybe in the history of the game, is actually a marginal athlete across the board. His arm is okay. His athleticism is okay. Nothing special. Nothing's great. It's all okay. But I think it's viable. It's not like it's bad. It's just, it's okay. So ironically, that's a problem. But the only reason it's a problem, I think, is because he doesn't seem to know that, right? Like in his brain, he's Deion. Nobody's told him that actually the stuff your dad can do, you can't do any of that. You are like a marginal athlete. He special. You, So he like back in the pocket and like dancing around from defenders seems to think he's Deion Sanders returning a punt and takes some horrendous sacks because of it. Now, I don't know how much of that you can change, because the offensive line is like utterly atrocious. I actually went back and started watching Jackson State tape to try and find what does this look like when the offensive line isn't just hemorrhaging pressure immediately every play. And I do think you see him like some better decision making in terms of like escapability and maneuvering a pocket and when to take a sack at Jackson State relative to Colorado. But I do wonder like how much of that is like a mental, like how much can you convince him, hey, dude, you are actually not a particularly good athlete. You need to get rid of the ball because you can't escape any of these people. I do wonder how much of that is just inherent in him and how much of that is something you can change at the next level.
Yeah, we'll have the full. Don't unload the entire discussion on these QBs. We'll save it for our QB episode. But I think the point for me is I'm torn on this. Like I wouldn't hate if the Browns took Shedeur Sanders because they need someone, and I'm always of the mind. I mean, here's the decision to me. I think Shedeur Sanders can be good at the next level. He could be perfectly fine and capable at the next level. And I think you're balancing that, what I just said, versus Abdul Carter playing opposite Myles Garrett, Travis Hunter being on your defense and your offense, for Cleveland, and the indecision at quarterback, the uncertainty at quarterback going forward, right? Kenny Pickett's my starter as of right now. So that's what you're battling, or you're going to get someone later. You're going to get a Dylan Gabriel or a Will Howard. You're going to get a guy later in the draft and kind of hope that he comes in and can develop. So that's what you're balancing with pick 2 if you're the Browns.
The last point I would make is that I do think that Shedeur Sanders is quite a good fit for a Kevin Stefanski offense, right? Those pluses I gave you before, accuracy, good decision-making, like the majority of the decisions are going to be schemed up for him. I think that actually specific to the Browns, Shedeur would be quite a good fit for the offense schematically. Now, countering that, you've got Cleveland weather, you've got, there's some negatives there as well. Who knows what Deion feels about both the city of Cleveland and the institution that is the Cleveland Browns. That can be a complicating factor, but purely X's and O's fitting Shedeur with Kevin Stefanski, I think is quite a good fit. Now, with that all said, I'm willing to take a step back and ask you what you want to do with this pick.
I'm trying to, because we're GMs for every team, I'm trying to figure out a scenario that comes next. I mean, like I'm thinking with the Giants, I wouldn't take a quarterback if we took Shedeur for the Browns, and I might do a whole like trade back into the first to get Jackson Dart if I'm the Giants.
Well, if Cam Ward, like are the Giants Cam Ward or nothing?
I think so. I mean, no, they're Cam Ward then Shedeur. I'm saying if Shedeur goes 2,
well, they're not going to trade to go get the second guy.
Yeah, I think the trade would occur for Cam Ward.
Okay.
And I'm also of the mind like they need to. I don't know if the Titans are going to trade now.
Yeah,
the Browns feel more likely to trade, but I don't know if I want to go trade for Shedeur Sanders from 3 to 2.
So I think pick 1 is correct. I think pick 2 is where it gets chaotic. I don't know what's going to happen here.
I know. Do you want to go Shedeur here, and then we'll kind of figure it out for the Giants?
I mean, I would take Shedeur here, but I also understand that I'm a relative minority in that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see the great alternatives here. This is why we're talking it out live on the air. We don't nothing pre-canned. Oh man, I don't love the spot. I don't love the spot for Cleveland. I feel like I'm overhyping the second wave of quarterbacks in this draft as well in my own mind. Dylan Gabriel, Will Howard, Riley Leonard, whoever else you love, and Tyler Shook, whoever else you want to take a shot on. Here's gonna be my bottom line on Sanders too. I think the pass catchers. We talk about supporting cast for Shedeur. I think the pass catchers were really good. Obviously, you had Travis Hunter, but LeJontay Wester and Will Shepard, those guys could make plays. They were pretty good. The O-line was awful, but I still believe he elevated.
Awful.
Right, he elevated that team, and there is this element of stepping onto a team as the quarterback and elevating them, or plateauing, and he elevated them. So let's do Shedeur at 2 and figure it out from here.
Done.
All right, Giants are at 3. Again, on Jackson, I understand Jackson Dart getting first-round hype out of some level of necessity. I'm not sure I'm there on him going.
Who was it? Somebody coming out of the combine put QBs 1, 2, 3.
I think it was CD. I think it was Charles Davis.
Yes, that's exactly who it was. It was Charles Davis.
Friend of the show, 33rd Team Zone. So that's what I'm saying. Like, coming out of the combine, some people, Charles Davis goes that way. Other people are like, oh, dude, Shedeur, he blew it with 2 interviews and out of 7 teams, and this Shedeur's dropping. And so coming out of the combine, some people are thinking it's a 1 QB race. Everyone else is falling. And then other people are like, nope, QB's 1, 2, 3. This is what we do. That's what the NFL does.
That's what the NFL does.
Again, I want to save like the deeper conversation for our QB episode. I think Jackson Dart does some really good things. I think he's very similar to Shedeur, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't think they have dynamic playmaking ability. Now, Dart definitely has some plays on his tape where he's working outside of structure and makes a really nice throw down the field. But they both have those plays where it's like, all right, go create outside of structure, and they can't evade the rush or maneuver that well. And I think it's a deep ball offense at Ole Miss where there's so many opportunities, but his deep ball accuracy is very scattershot. I think his intermediate accuracy is excellent. And so Nate Tice always talks about when you make a player comp and the guy's not a superstar, everybody hates you. Jackson Dart reminded me of Mac Jones a little bit with his strengths and weaknesses.
Now we're talking.
I'm just saying, and I'm not even saying that as like Mac Jones, the guy that has become a perennial backup. I'm just saying some of the strengths, like the inconsistent deep ball, the intermediate accuracy, you're not going to get a ton with your legs, but there'll be some plays in there. It reminded me a lot of Mac Jones.
I will say, this time a year ago, the idea that the run of QBs would be as strong as it was, I think people expected them to kind of go 1, 2, 3, maybe, right? But the idea that 6 of those guys were going to go where they went, I think it was not prevalent at that time. It was like, the top 3 will go somewhere near the top of that draft, but then there'll be some kind of drop or some kind of gap, and there wasn't. It just kept going.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, look, I always try to put myself into the headspace and where the rumors were a year ago. JJ McCarthy started getting all the buzz at this time, right? Coming out of the combine. He started to get that buzz. I never totally bought him being the guy there was rumors that he could go at 3, or the Vikings would trade up to 3 and take him, or 4 and take him. Remember, it was going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 being McCarthy, with the Vikings trading up to 4. And then Penix and Nix always felt like a second tier. Like, we'll take him in the mid first if we're the Raiders, but these guys are late first, second round type of players for a lot of people at this point. And then boom, all of a sudden they're 6 in the top 12 and no defensive players coming off the board until 14. So I'm not ready to take Jackson Dart here. I don't know how far along you are on his film, but I'm not ready to take Dart here. I'm ready to play this game. If I'm the Giants, right, and we're really in this situation, I think Dart's fine as QB3. Giants pick at 34. I might try to talk to teams that feel pretty good about their roster. Maybe the Rams the Rams at 26 are really interesting because they gave up their 2 last year for Braden Fisk. Do they want to accumulate more picks? Like, could I trade up to 26 and get Jackson Dart? We're the GM for every team, so we can make this happen.
I mean, is there anybody that would trade up for the top defender, right? Like this idea of Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter. Is anybody trading for that guy in this draft?
We don't see as much of that at the top of the draft as we used to. I do feel like Travis Hunter could make people go crazy though. Like if there's one guy, right? He is one of one as far as the unique ability to play two positions. And so if like the Jets at 7 or the Panthers at 8 had a special plan for him, whoever it is, probably not the Panthers the way they tied up their corners. The Saints, like, Mickey Loomis. No, we need Travis. Travis Hunter's got to be our guy. I don't give up all the picks for him. It
is funny. Like if you covet that, it's worth so much more than any other player. Yeah. Like we've been talking about it from the opposite, or I have from the opposite point of view. Like forget this idea of what he can do as a two-way player. If you just need wide receiver 1, he's wide receiver 1. He's worth, a top 5 draft pick. If you just need cornerback 1, he's cornerback 1. You could take him with a top 5 draft pick. It's all fine, right? But if you are actually a team, and I think most teams, I in fact think view him as a predominantly, one-way player that might be able to do like a comic gimmick package of whatever on the other side of the ball. But if you are genuinely a team that looks at this and says, he is unique, he is one of one, he's already demonstrated the ability and the capacity to play genuinely both ways for, let's say, the majority of the snaps on either side of the ball. If you genuinely believe he can do that, he's the most valuable player in this draft outside of quarterbacks.
The chat does remind me, Will Morris, the Texans did just do it with Will Anderson. The Vikings traded up for Dallas Turner, but that wasn't in the top 10.
Yeah.
So yeah, it could happen, but I'm generally not willing to go make that move. I mean, I could see a team like New Orleans doing it or whoever, somebody going to make that move.
Is anybody willing to in this draft? What does the trade sim suggest?
Who knows, man? I mean, I would take Hunter here if I'm the Giants. I wonder how much do their free agency moves affect things? They have Deonte Banks. They paid Paulson Adebo. They brought in Darius Slayton, but Slayton's making wide receiver 3 type money right now. It's not like he's a clear 2. Does any of that say we're not getting Travis Hunter? We're all locked in on a quarterback? Maybe. I mean, they at least have their starters. Tied up on both sides.
Right. On the other hand, Travis Hunter could easily come in and be the best corner on this roster if he's good.
Oh, yeah, like Deonte Banks is not keeping me from drafting Travis Hunter. So I don't think there's any moves there. I would just take Hunter. I would take Hunter and figure out quarterback later here if I'm the Giants.
Yeah, equally, if he's really good, he could be wide receiver 2, and Darius Slayton's a really good 3. I don't think any of those moves are stopping you drafting Travis Hunter.
Let's do it.
Done.
Hunter the Giants. Yeah, we're only on pick 3 here. We spent about 20 minutes talking about wide receiver contracts. We do have some breaking news over the last few minutes here. Derek Stingley with a record 3-year, $90 million extension, including $89 million guaranteed per Adam Schefter. Highest paid defensive back in NFL history, Derek Stingley. So.
And just another
Texans,
interesting contrast between the wide receiver market and the DB market again.
Oh, yeah. I mean, 30. It's getting up there,
it's 10 million off.
Yeah, but it's getting up there. It's finally getting up over 30.
Yeah, but that's so it's like the idea that the guy, your top corner, is worth 75% of your top wide receiver is pretty interesting.
No, it is. It is an interesting discussion. It's an interesting discussion that we don't have time for. But yeah, it's a 3-year extension, by the way. It's not just a 3-year deal. It's an extension on his rookie deal. So they got him for the next 5 years.
Which is also why it's less newsworthy than the Bengals one. And we're going to spend significantly less time talking about it.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we've been waiting for this Bengals thing for years, basically. Patriots up at 4 here. And so here's where, when you talk about what free agency did, and I made the point in our Patriots discussion last week, I don't think the Patriots went into free agency and it's like, we need to build the defense first and not the offense, but that's kind of how things fell. They wanted to pay over $30 million for Chris Godwin, which, by the way, if you go back to the Bengals discussion, T. Higgins at 28.5 per year is actually looking pretty good after they waited this long. So New England tried to make moves on offense. They just happened to go defense in free agency. That's just where the opportunities were. And they added the great Morgan Moses at right tackle, but they still have the massive need at left tackle. Mark Daniels, Patriots insider, has continued to reiterate that there are a lot of fans of Will Campbell in the building in New England, that there are Will Campbell fans, and the fact that they have not gotten a left tackle and they did get a right tackle might insinuate, hey, they're going to make the unsexy, get the tackle pick. Abdul Carter's there. You'd have to pass him up, or a Mason Graham, another defensive, game wrecker type. But I do feel like this is going to be trending Will Campbell, or maybe if other people are lower on Will Campbell, they'll try to trade down. But again, you're going to need a partner, someone that would want to come up and get an Abdul Carter here.
Well, that's the thing. So regardless of whether or not it makes you more or less likely to draft Will Campbell, if you were looking at what happened in free agency and like, well, where else would the Patriots go? It made them less likely, I think, to draft Abdul Carter. It made them less likely to draft Mason Graham. So 2 of the top 5 guys that you would be looking at are gone in terms of likelihood. So now you're down to, well, if we're not drafting Will Campbell, what else are they taking? And at that point, I mean, you could make a case that Tet McMillan at this spot, like wide receiver 1, I don't think he's worth the 4th overall pick of the draft. I don't think he's that guy, but you can make the case. But it's sort of, I think just by process of elimination, it's more likely they're drafting Campbell here.
The one thing I will say, because if we're going to talk trade, the Panthers, given that who could trade up for Abdul Carter here? I think the Panthers at 8 and the Bears at 10.
Right.
Are just 2 teams that come to mind that could be. Anyone could. I mean, he's a fit for everybody if you're talking the clear top edge rusher in the draft. But the Panthers, given that they missed out on Milton Williams and still need edge help. The Bears, given that they just fulfilled all of their offensive line needs, and their next thing may be running back. But man, if they could go get blue chip Abdul Carter on that defensive line, I could see that. And then New England could say, hey, we think at least Will Campbell or Kelvin Banks will still be there at 8 or 10.
Right. As it happens, I accidentally clicked the button and drafted Will Campbell. So the Patriots have taken him. We almost screwed up the whole draft. I almost accidentally drafted, Genty for them instead, but Campbell works.
I had a great thought exercise here, finding trade partners for the Patriots where they could still get a tackle. But we're going to take Will Campbell at 4. It's locked in because Sam pressed the button. That's how we do it.
Okay, all right, great idea, but unfortunately, sometimes that's the way the draft goes.
It is. Sometimes you send in the wrong card. Did you see the theory that I don't buy, that the Raiders sent in the wrong Byron Young card a couple years ago because Byron Young, the defensive tackle, has been not good, and Byron Young, the edge, has been good? I don't buy.
Somebody else pointed out though, like they called the guy. It's not like they, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
like you don't just send in the card, and it's not like the 1960s, right? We can actually accidentally draft a dead guy. Like they called him up. They were like, "Dude, you ready to play?" Like, you know what I mean? It's very difficult now to draft the wrong person.
It's a very, very stupid theory. It's not like the Carl Winslow origin story that you sent me this weekend, which was outstanding.
It was great.
Everybody needs to check that out on Facebook. Did you tweet that out? that was one of, I was like, that's one of the funniest things I've seen in a while.
Yeah,
all right.
Good.
Jags are at 5. I love Mason Graham for the Jags. I just do. Love Mason Graham for the Jags.
Yeah, nothing. I mean, they did a lot of things in free agency, but I don't think any of them really affect the 5th overall pick.
I agree. To me, this debate is Mason Graham, and I am intrigued by Tet McMillan. I am very intrigued by him next to Brian Thomas Jr. Especially, the one thing that they did in free agency that is interesting is bringing in De'Ami Brown, another vertical threat. Gabe Davis, vertical threat. So now they have 2 inconsistent field stretchers, and Brian Thomas Jr., who looked like a true all-around wide receiver 1. Ted McMillan, if you have questions about Ted McMillan, it's generally going to be speed-based. It's going to be like Drake London a couple years ago. Hey, this guy's good at receiver, but he didn't run. and he doesn't look all that fast on film. What do we do with that? And he was still the top receiver drafted. Marvin Harrison Jr. last year didn't run, might have questions about his speed. And so to me, that's the only question about Ted McMillan. He's not as good maybe as those guys either. That's the other thing. But like, if the biggest question is probably like, is he a 4.55 guy? Is he a 4.5? Like, where's his speed and dynamism? I just think he's a very good all-around receiver and would be an outstanding high-end possession type opposite. And that's not a knock, but a high-end just get open and make things happen opposite Brian Thomas Jr.
I mean, I think there's a strong case for Abdul Carter as well. Number one, I think a lot of teams are going to see him as the best player in this draft, period, like position agnostic. Number two, it's a new regime who has no preconceived, ties to any of these guys that were drafted. Obviously, Josh Hines-Allen already has the contract. He's their best pass rusher. But like, the new regime doesn't care what Trayvon Walker is, right? They don't necessarily need to be like, hey, we drafted this guy number 1 overall. We're invested in him. He's getting better. They can just go, Abdul Carter's the best player in this draft. Why wouldn't we draft him here?
You're right. I forgot that we didn't take Abdul Carter in the first 4 picks. Almost every other draft, he is off the board, and I think he probably will be. But yeah, I'm fine with Abdul Carter here too. For the Jags,
I think in this scenario, it would either be Abdul Carter or a trade down where somebody's coming up for Abdul Carter.
Do you want to concoct a trade?
So what about this, right? We keep matching the Panthers with the best pass rusher. Like, what if the Panthers saw, a rare, oh, look, Abdul Carter slid to 5. That's a jump up of, just 3 picks.
I like that.
Right,
not that the Jags wouldn't want him. But I could absolutely see the Panthers, like, as aggressive as the Panthers have been on the defensive side of the ball this offseason. I could absolutely see this.
All right, what is that? What's the trade chart tell me that should be worth?
Are you asking
5 to 8 is effectively a
pick up a 3,
low third, high 4th round pick.
Yeah.
So do they have?
We're not making these picks anyway, but we'll convey what happens here.
Hang on, let's do it. I'm just gonna
give Jags will have to send something back. Give extra pick. Eric would never do 2 for 1. He wants an extra pick swap here. Yeah, there you go. All right. Pick swap.
Done.
Got to pick swap that. Panthers come up to get Abdul Carter. And I think the Jags will still get a really good player. They'll feel, they're rebuilding that thing.
Boom.
Then we can have the McMillan discussion. Raiders are up at 6. Do they go Mason?
All right, what did they do in free agency that would affect anything? Well, they got their quarterback.
They got Geno Smith. I mean, that's another one. Like, I was when we talked about the Raiders the other day, a lot of Raiders fans came in, saw our Raiders analysis. I think they've done a nice job. I was not questioning Jacoby Myers as a very good receiver, but he's a high end 2. Tet McMillan as a complementary piece would be really interesting. The defensive line, if we want to, copy this blueprint of building the defensive line, we have Max Crosby locked up. We have Malcolm Kuntz coming back. We have Tyree Wilson there. Christian Wilkins just made a ton of money last year. Do you want another Christian Wilkins interior disruptor like a Mason Graham? They brought back Adam Butler, but again, Butler's probably not keeping me from drafting Mason Graham. And I do believe they are one of the more likely teams to go after Ashton Genty with Pete Carroll as head coach here.
That's the thing. I think all these guys at the top actually are pretty interesting options. Tet McMillan, Mason Graham, Ashton Genty. Like, pretty much any of those are pretty intriguing options to the Raiders. The other point I would make, and I don't think this is a Jackson Dart thing necessarily, unless they love Jackson Dart for some reason, but I don't know that Geno Smith keeps them out of the quarterback market. It would have to be the quarterback that they really like. But if the right guy is there at 6, I don't think that they're necessarily not going to pick him because they traded for Geno.
See, I think it does. And I usually play that game every year, Sam. I mean, I was the guy that when Big Ben was in his last couple of years at Pittsburgh, I was like, oh, they'll draft somebody in the first round every year here. And they never did. I always said I would, right? I don't care who my QB is. If he's not a top 5 guy, you could draft that next quarterback. Who cares? You just do it. It's too valuable. Do the Michael Penix thing. Other than the Falcons, we haven't seen teams do this very often, especially as they just went out and got Geno Smith. I think he's tied with Pete Carroll for the next few years.
Maybe, but his age, you would be crazy to not be thinking. I mean, the Seahawks were supposedly thinking about the future. I mean, a lot will depend. Like, they have from now until the draft to work on this contract and to get him signed long term. Like, the breakdown in Seattle was he wanted way more money than they were willing to give him. If the Raiders are willing to give him that money, then maybe. But, you know, depending on the kind of contract that they sign him to, I don't think that they're necessarily out of that market. The other thing that's interesting for Geno is, so he's 34 years old, 34 and a half ish. On the other hand, he's got very little mileage because he spent most of his career like wandering the league as a backup, as a journeyman. Like, that's going to be a really interesting kind of case study in aging arcs, right? Like, does Geno Smith age like a quarterback who's 34, 35 years old? Or is he functionally like a 29-year-old quarterback in terms of miles on the clock because the dude's barely played any football for like most of his career is the last 3 years?
Yeah. And well, if you would have predicted Russell Wilson's decline at his age when he's, doing lunges in the, aisle of an airplane, the guy works hard, but he declined in his mid 30s.
He's played a lot of football.
He has. So yeah, it's definitely different than what Geno has. Look, I just don't think they're picking a QB at 6 here. So let's make a pick. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think they are either because the quarterback option is Jackson Dart. I'm just saying, if the right guy is there that they love, I don't think that they're necessarily out of that market just because they signed Geno.
I like Mason Graham here for the Raiders. I don't know about you, but I still love the idea of Mason Graham, Christian Wilkins, Max Crosby, all on the same line.
Honestly, I mean, look at PFF's board right now is McMillan, Mason Graham, Ashton Genty, Jedi Barron. Any of those picks I am fine with if I'm the Raiders.
Yeah. I would go Graham. He's 5 on the consensus board. He's the top player. I like him there. Jets at 7. This is the team. So because of some of the holes that they have now on their roster, I think I like picking for the least because they could go various ways. They could go Membu at right tackle. I think we may have done that last week. They'd still need a receiver next to Garrett Wilson, which doesn't feel great. I mean, you have Justin Fields as the high-end bridge quarterback right now, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on the Jets here at 7?
Yeah, I mean, similar point to the Raiders that I don't think Fields stops you drafting a quarterback here if you love one. I don't. Again, as long as the quarterback option is Jackson Dart, I don't think teams in the top 10 are going to love him to the point where they're drafting one. But yeah, other than that, you can definitely go in a variety of different ways. I think McMillan is on the table. I think Genty is now off the table because they have a better backfield than the Raiders did. But all these other options, Tyler Warren, I think, is fascinating here. It's weird because they passed on Brock Bowers a year ago, lower down, and the juxtaposition of Bowers going outside of the top 10 and then a year later Tyler Warren going inside the top 10 doesn't feel right. But drafts don't work like that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not in a vacuum. It's relative to the other players in your draft. It's relative to needs at that time. Like, you can't just transpose one to the other and like that. But it would definitely feel strange. But I think it's a good fit.
It feels worse for me because of the other needs on the team. If they can get a starting corner, starting receiver, starting right tackle, or Tyler Warren at tight end. No offense to Tyler Warren, I don't think any team before maybe the Colts at 14, and even that I hate. I feel like they're a lot of people are giving him to the Colts because it's it's the one spot on the depth chart that they need. I think Tyler Warren's a fringe top 15 pick. And I like him as a player, but he's tight end. Yeah, he's a tight end. He's not Brock Bowers. Sorry, he's not Brock Bowers. Shouldn't be in the same discussion. I would hate that if I was the Jets.
Just out here hating the man.
He's a fun player. He's a very fun player. Don't want Tyler Warren. Any of those other players are good. I like Barron. I know Barron's way high now on the PFF board. Great. He's awesome. But I think Membu or Ted McMillan is probably or Banks. I mean, Membu I don't think needs to surpass Kelvin Banks as a player here, but he is did play right tackle. That is the need for the Jets. If you do want to say, hey, let's avoid any sort of position movement, there is some value in that.
Yeah, if you limit it to just receivers, corners, and tackles, you end up with this kind of option. McMillan, Barron, Membu, Will Johnson, the Michigan corner. And then
Johnson's dropping a lot. He's 11 on the consensus board. He's been as high as 4. Johnson's dropping a lot just from in-season injury and just not doing any of the workouts, which I think is fair.
Is that just because he hasn't shown anything yet?
I think people did want to see him run. You know, he's more of a zone off coverage type of corner. I think people wanted to see him run, and the fact that he won't be able to tick any of those boxes. And I think it's a deep corner class as far they're like at least clustered together. I don't think Will Johnson was like in his own world. So I think that's going to hurt him and why he's dropping.
All right. So where do you want to go here?
I'd go either Tet or Membu here.
I think they would probably build trenches first, right?
I would think so.
So Membu?
Yeah, let's do that.
The big Missouri offensive tackle. Not that there are small tackles these days.
No, there's one small guard. His name's Willie Lampkin.
Yes.
So Jags are back up at 8. And if they could accumulate the extra pick and, still get a guy like McMillan here.
Yeah, so that's an interesting kind of scenario for them. They trade out of 5 essentially because the offer is good enough that they take and they're willing to move back. But it does take the 2 guys that they would have taken most likely off the board in terms of Abdul Carter and Mason Graham in 3 picks. So that does become kind of an intriguing, do we trade down and what do we have at the end of that? But McMillan would certainly be a pretty good consolation prize.
I'm really intrigued by him as the complement to Brian Thomas Jr. And this is, the weaponry that Trevor Lawrence needs.
They would be, I think, really complementary pieces within the same offense. I think the skill sets would mesh really well together.
No, I agree. You want to go that way?
Yeah.
McMillan? Let's go. Tedero and McMillan to the Jags at 8. Puts the Saints up on the clock at 9 overall. What are they going to do?
Oh, man, the Saints, they just need a lot of things.
I'm at a loss for words for the Saints because I do feel like, they could go any which way. The consensus board has a bit of a drop off, and as does the PFF board, slight drop off when it comes to the defensive linemen. I mean, I could see them going Shamar Stewart this high, but this is where on the consensus board, I just think defensive line, Jalen Walker's 12, Shamar Stewart 13 consensus board, Michael Williams is 15. Look, they all have varying degrees of question marks. Mike Green is 16, but I could see any of those edge rushers being in play here for the Saints.
So, the idea of this is what happened in free agency that kind of changed your outlook or your opinion on what a team would be doing in the draft. The thing that the Saints free agency period sort of signified is they're not rebuilding. They're not tearing this down. They're not starting over, rebooting. They're just going to do this, if you want to say the competitive rebuild thing or the just refusal to acknowledge that they're rebuilding, whatever it is. Like the Saints are expecting to try and win a division again this year. Like that's what their approach is suggested. So if that's their approach, like who's the most, because they're not just tearing this thing down. They're who's the guy that adds the most right now?
The chat is reminding they lost corners, but kind of. They brought Isaac Yiadom back. Kool-Aid McKinstry, last year's second rounder. Who's the guy that keeps them most competitive right now? I mean, I don't think bringing Chase Young back. They brought back Chase Young and Cameron Jordan.
Yeah.
On the defensive line, does that keep them from drafting an edge? Do they get younger at corner here and grab a guy like Will Johnson or Barron if you like him that much? The other question still at tackle, where Trevor Penning heads into the last year of his deal, and if you want to have a guy like Kelvin Banks to do the whole guard to tackle move, or he plays left tackle, Fuanga moves back to the right side where he played in college, just more flexibility on the offensive line.
Is Ryan Ramczyk still alive? Like, what's his deal now?
I think he's still all but retired. Essentially going to be retired.
Right. Okay.
So consider it Penning in his last year and Fuanga. So would they go tackle back-to-back years? The Saints could absolutely draft Ashton Genty.
They really could.
It would feel terrible. That's what, you know what I mean? Like they need help, I think, on the defensive line. Same thing I said about the Jets. If you need help at all of these premium positions and then you draft the running back, it's going to feel horrible. It's just going to when you're evaluating this whole thing.
Yeah. Offensive line would be interesting. I mean, Barron would be interesting because he's just such a versatile. I mean, Barron's interesting anywhere because he's such a good, versatile player that fits literally in any secondary in the league. Even if you're a secondary that likes long outside boundary corners, he still fits in your secondary. You're just not playing him at outside corner. So Barron's fascinating to me because I like him everywhere.
Yeah. I'd be fine with Barron here.
I'm not necessarily saying that's the pick. I'm just saying that I'm going to like his fit for every team from now on until we draft him.
Shamar Stewart just feels like a Saints pick here, though, too. Shamar Stewart or Ashton Genty feels like a very Saints pick here.
Shamar Stewart, basically just what they wanted Marcus Davenport to be.
Yeah, kind of. Get their next Davenport. Look, like I said, I think it's a deep edge group, a deep defensive line group. Those guys just all have their questions. I know you're going to bring up Kenneth Grant probably.
No,
all right, what do we want to do?
What do we want to do here?
Too. You what?
I said I would like that too. I mean, the Saints definitely do skew towards these, athletic, high potential freak shows.
You want to do that? Is this a curveball that we can throw?
Which of the three of those that fit that general broad category? Shamar Stewart, the Texas A&M edge rusher, Michael Williams, the Georgia edge rusher, or Kenneth Grant, the Michigan defensive tackle. Like all three of those guys fall generally into that fairly broad bucket.
I think Shamar fits that the most. I don't know if having Chase Young, Carl Granderson, and Cam Jordan keeps them from going edge here, because they've got Granderson and Chase Young locked up for a few years now.
Yeah. It probably shouldn't. I mean, really. It might, but.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect this to happen. All right, let's make a call. Do you want to go corner?
Corner.
Yadam,
So
Kool-Aid, and Alontae Taylor. I mean, I still think Will Johnson should be going in this spot.
Right.
But I could see, I don't know, man.
Jahdae Barron doesn't feel like a Saints style of corner.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying
Will
he's
Johnson
has a defensive back, but I don't
Johnson
think they would play him at corner.
No, I don't know if we can go corner here. I hate this spot for the Saints.
I think it is freaky defensive lineman of some kind.
You want this to be your Kenneth Grant spot this high?
Maybe. Would they be a sneaky spot for Tyler Warren? I haven't seen this too many places. I know they just brought back Juwan Johnson, but Juwan Johnson and Foster Moreau are fine, but are they keeping you from drafting Tyler Warren?
I mean, me, because I don't want to take a tight end that high, especially if I do already have one. But it's tough with Kellen Moore. You can't define him by like a certain, he's a 12 personnel guy. He's an 11 personnel guy. He's an adjust to your scheme type of guy.
Yeah.
I think he would use Warren just fine. I think it's a tough spot. And look, the other difficult spot here is I love James Pierce and Mike Green as players, but there's whatever off field for both of those guys, and that affects all of our mock drafts here. So,
and it's also kind of, I sort of feel about Tyler Warren the way, sometimes like you would want a wide receiver here, but if you don't think the wide receiver is value, and maybe you think Tyler, like the way Brock Bowers was sort of like the Raiders' #1 receiver last year, generally speaking, the tight end is not that guy. But if the tight end can be that guy and you don't have line of sight to the wide receiver, maybe that's where you go.
Man, I would feel dirty taking a tight end or running back if I was that good.
But like if you have
or had that many holes.
let's say Chris Olave comes back healthy from the concussions. If you have Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed comes back healthy from his injury, so these are some significant ifs. But like Olave, Rashid Shaheed, and then instead of a high volume other number 2 wide receiver, Tyler Warren is that guy. I think that could be a really nice combination on offense.
Just a high pick to force you into using that much 12 personnel. That's the only thing. That's all I'm
but
saying.
like, I don't know. I feel like when you're basically turning a tight end into glorified slot wide receiver anyway, I'm less concerned about the semantics of formation personnel.
I just don't know if Warren's that good.
Wow. You really hate Warren, huh?
No, I mean, the same analysis I had a few picks ago. If I said I don't want him before pick 15, I still, like, we're sitting at pick 9. I haven't changed my opinion on him.
All right.
Sorry. Got heated there. Didn't mean to get
what are we
heated
doing
on Patty's Day. I don't know. We're going to be here for 4 hours, though. Is everybody enjoying this? We're having fun. Let the chat do it.
Run a poll.
I don't care.
I mean, the most Saints thing to do would be to just take a random freaky defensive lineman.
Which one?
I mean, just because interior is a bigger hole than edge, let's say Kenneth Grant.
Kenneth Grant. Well, we got your Kenneth Grant agenda. Do it.
I mean, I'm not trying to push an agenda here. I'm just saying that of the 3, he makes the most sense.
That's fine. Let's do it.
Look, see, all these things are blue. That's good.
Could see it happen. Bears going to take Ashton Genty.
2 Michigan defensive tackles in the top 10.
As expected. Hey, they're both national champs. Just 2 years ago. Makes sense. Bears are up at 10 here.
Yes, they are. Now,
the Bears want to go here.
This is a team where free agency definitely had effects. So going into free agency, like, this team desperately needs offensive line help. They attacked offensive line in free agency. They bring in Joe Thuney with the trade. They bring in Drew Dahlman. They bring in Jonah Jackson with the trade. So they basically rebuilt an entire interior. The offensive tackles are Darnell Wright, Braxton Jones. Jones is good, not great. Does that keep you away from the offensive tackle market? Like, if you love the Kelvin Banks, the Texas offensive tackle / guard, but most people see him as a tackle, does that stop you drafting him here because you have Braxton Jones? Probably not, but you don't need to.
Yeah, I think offensive line's off the table. To me, I think if they have these options here, they're debating.
You think it's totally off the table? Like, even if they love Kelvin Banks, you think Braxton Jones being there stops them taking him here?
No, I mean, it's not literally off the table. I think it's less likely. So I think they would skew toward an Ashton Genty versus best defensive lineman available debate. In the D line, they have Dayo Odiengbo, and they have him and Montez Sweat. Odiengbo's more of a multi-gap, movable piece. Austin Booker and Dominique Robinson as backups. Like, they have room for a next edge rusher. They brought in Grady Jarrett. They have Andrew Billings coming back off injury. Gervon Dexter. So they have some depth on the defensive line. They still don't have a great dynamic player there, so they could easily go edge. So I think they're debating between best edge available, Ashton Genty, and all of the offensive line moves move the Kelvin Banks discussion down a peg.
Well, that's the next philosophical question for Ben Johnson is, okay, evidently you believe the offensive line is really important, core, fundamental to everything you're doing. Does that then follow that you want the running game to be in that kind of space as well? Like the Lions running game, it was always in a pretty good spot, and they made it even more potent by drafting, somebody really high that could turbocharge that thing with explosiveness. Now, very different player, Ashton Genty, but like, does it follow that with this real focus on the offensive line, everyone's been sort of viewing that through the lens of what that means for Caleb Williams, but actually, are they targeting a guy like Ashton Genty, who they think not only does that help everything, but it continues to help Caleb Williams?
Yeah, I could see them going Genty here, and then you have DeAndre Swift. Not that it's Montgomery and Gibbs, but DeAndre Swift moves down to more of a Gibbs role, get him into space, let him try to create big plays. Genty's going to be more of your workhorse. I think Ben Johnson saw the value of the two running back system, both really good players, one tackle breaker and one explosive threat, and I think he can recreate that. And having the offensive line intact makes it more palatable.
It is difficult to overstate just how silly this sort of statistical profile is for Ashton Jeanty. I mean, these numbers aren't just, good, they're absurd. All these numbers are like the very top percentile. 152 broken tackles over a season is the highest that PFF has ever measured. Like carries of 15 or more yards, number one. Like all of these things are insane. The only even minor quibble you can have with Jeanty as a prospect is strength of competition. Like he did it at Boise State. He didn't do it in the SEC. But just the evidence you have on Jeanty is all insane.
I think that's where they go. I think they go Jeanty here.
Yeah.
Jeanty at 10 for the Bears. Somewhat predictive, somewhat, kind of want to see it. Thought exercise.
So has the last few years changed your opinion at all in where you would draft a running back in a given draft? So we basically had this conversation more or less the same with Bijan Robinson a couple of years ago. Has both his draft class and subsequent things, i.e. Saquon, changed your analysis at all?
I mean, I would say slightly. I still think if I was in the room, I wouldn't do it because the surplus value is still there, right? There's a difference between, does Jahmyr Gibbs make an impact on the field? Absolutely. I see it. But it is very much the icing on the cake to the Lions offense, right? They have so much else. Bijan is similar, right? I mean, the rest of the offense is still really good and Bijan's good, but there's a difference between that and then, what you end up paying those guys and what you could do with the rest of that money, right? So you never get that counterfactual. So like it skewed me a little bit. I'm also of the mind, Sam, I think when I've studied this, if you knew you were going to hit on a player, I think that's more important than the positional value aspect. Like if you knew you were going to hit, it honestly doesn't matter which positions you take, but because we don't know, that's where the uncertainty comes in because there's still Najee Harris still exists, right? He looked like a really good prospect, went in the first round. That didn't help Pittsburgh quite, at all. So I'd say it helped a little bit.
All right.
Did I freeze?
I don't think so. Maybe.
Okay, good.
I also
Does
think,
it change you? You're more likely, right? Aren't you more likely to want to take a running back in the first?
So yeah, I mean, I was okay with taking a running back in the first before. My thing was like how high you can take them. Like we had the conversation with Bijan Robinson. To me, I think it was like number 8 overall or something like that. Beyond, I wouldn't take him above number 8 because I think at that point the contract is getting so high that there's no value to it. There's no surplus value to it because you're already paying the guy like one of the best paid running backs in the league at that spot. Now that's probably shifted because the money for running backs, like with Saquon getting his deal, like that's getting pushed higher. But I think generally the analysis is broadly the same, that I'm okay taking a guy in the first round if you think he's really good and your situation is already there for him to come in and make it work.
That's where I feel like here's one more addition here, right? Because you can make these arguments every which way, and what the heck, we're going to spend 3 hours today. Why not? You can make these arguments because the teams that have been smart and added Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley they're the smart teams that already had a great thing in place, right? If you add Derrick Henry to Lamar Jackson, you had Saquon Barkley to the Eagles, yeah, that's going to do well. You had Christian McCaffrey to the 49ers. That's going to do well. All of those guys, I think, elevated their offenses on an already elevated offense, right? All of that's true. The counterfactual there would be Bucky Irving is a 4th-round pick who looked awesome in college and translated to the NFL. And it's like, oh, you just get this guy in the 4th. And then the third piece of evidence, and this would go back toward like get the good running back, I think would be a team like Dallas and even Minnesota to a point a couple of years ago before they got Aaron Jones. I think the people who have done it well on paper, which is don't overcommit to the running back, just kind of like take the leftovers, I think those running games were hurt by it. I think Dallas's run game, not attacking the position with high draft capital or high value players, actually did hurt the position quite a bit. So that's probably how I would do it as a GM. I would just take the leftovers, right, at running back. And I don't know if that is the actual best way. Like at some point, you probably do have to drop a second round pick in there, and for me especially, get that explosive player that's gonna have take it to the house ability.
And also, look, this is a really good running back draft. Like, it's really good. It's really deep. The talent in this draft in particular is insane. And, will Genty definitely be the best running back from this draft class? Maybe not. But the more the further down you go, the less certainty you have in those guys becoming that guy, right? I think the balance of probabilities is still that Genty will be the most likely running back from this class to be exceptional because he's so good. And that all the evidence says that. Will that actually be the case? Like, is it Genty versus the field? You take the field, but identifying which one of those guys is going to be as good or better than Genty is the tricky part. So can you get a running back in the third round who will cost a fraction of the amount? And does that guy have a chance of being this year's Bucky Irving, the best guy from this draft class? Definitely. But is that chance as large as it is with a guy like Genty? And that's the difference between taking the guy high up versus taking the guy in the mid rounds.
Yeah. I also think there's a little bit of the touchy-feely aspect of it. And when you have like a massive tackle, I think David Montgomery adds so much to the Lions offense with just his physicality. I think Genty has some of that as well. So that's just another factor that I think is a feather in his cap. You want to reset the top 10 here real quick?
Sure. QBs went 1-2. We went Cam Ward, number 1 overall, to the Tennessee Titans. The Miami quarterback. We went Shedeur Sanders, the Colorado quarterback, to the Cleveland Browns at number 2 overall. Travis Hunter, the Colorado cornerback / wide receiver, to the Giants at 3. Will Campbell, the LSU tackle, to the Patriots at number 4. Then we had our first trade of the Sam and Steve mock drafts. We had the Carolina Panthers jumping up 3 spots, giving up a third-round pick. I think we had them, and some exchanging later on to get Abdul Carter, the Penn State edge rusher, at number 5 overall. Mason Graham, the Michigan defensive tackle, goes 6 to the Raiders. Armand Membu, the Missouri tackle, goes number 7 to the Jets. Tet McMillan goes number 8 to the Jacksonville Jags, who dropped down. The wide receiver from Arizona. Kenneth Grant, the other Michigan defensive tackle, goes number 9 to the Saints. And then Ashton Genty, the Boise State running back, number 10 to the Chicago Bears.
All right, great job. Puts the Niners up at 11. I've really enjoyed the Kelvin Banks pick here for the Niners as a guard / tackle in the future. Is that too chalky for the way we've done mocks the last few weeks?
Well, so the Niners free agency was largely about departures, right? It's guys that they lost. They've lost multiple players across a lot of places. Defense in particular, they lose edge rushers, they lose cornerbacks. I think, look, Kelvin Banks definitely in the running for their offensive line, but I also think the corner spot for them makes some sense given their losses. I think defense is definitely the area I think that needs the most help, even if Kelvin Banks in the offensive line is a sort of fairly natural pairing as well.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I agree. Kind of Leonard Floyd's out as well. They have such a massive need on the defensive line. I mean, starting corner is an issue. They might have to go defensive line here. They might have to, Sam. Nick Bosa, Drake Jackson. I know you liked Drake a few years ago. Obviously hasn't worked yet for him. Jordan Elliott, Kevin Gibbons. Man, they might have to go defensive line. Given the needs and where the board falls, right? So you've got Jalen Walker, you've got Michael Williams, you've got the Mike Greens and James Pierces of the world. I think you got to take one of those. As much as I loved Kelvin Banks for them before all these other needs popped up and in crucial spots, especially on the defensive line.
Jalen Walker for them would be fascinating.
Who's running the show for them right now? Because again, I'm always.
Jalen Walker, the Georgia hybrid edge rusher, what is
Salah's
he,
back.
6'2", 245 or whatever he ended up measuring at the combine. Extremely inexperienced at either position, but showed some real juice as a pass rusher. Like fitting into that 49ers defense would be pretty interesting.
So they have Robert Saleh back, and I keep wanting to pair Jalen Walker with somebody that's gonna use him in more of a hybrid role or drop him into coverage or blitz more. And I don't know if that's Saleh. I honestly feel Michael Williams might be a better fit here with his length, run stopping ability, upside, having him as more of like the power edge opposite Nick Bosa.
Saleh's also a guy that's prepared to just have a situational pass rusher, though. Like if he thinks this, I think he does a pretty good job of putting defenders in good positions to succeed, even if I'm not using a guy as a hybrid, like jack of all trades, whatever. Like if Jalen Walker is a guy that's a full-time edge rusher and ends up being a really good sort of undersized player at that size, Saleh can get that out of him. If what he is an elite situational pass rusher that has a Bryce Huff role, I think Saleh gets that out of him. I'm not concerned about the fit of putting Jalen Walker with Saleh's defense.
No, I get it. I also don't know if Walker's definitely a better prospect than Michael Williams from Georgia. I think they're actually different players, similar level of prospect.
Maybe right now on the consensus board, the best defensive lineman available, we have Jalen Walker at 12, Shamar Stewart at 13, Michael Williams at 15, Mike Green at 16, and then a little bit, the gap is now starting to emerge between that group and James Pierce, who's dropped to 19.
Yeah, do you want to grab one of the Georgia guys?
Sure.
You want Walker?
I would take Walker, but you want to take the more traditional, prototypical one?
I kind of like that as a compliment to Bosa. And then whenever maybe we get Jalen Walker to a scheme fit that I like more, like the Falcons at 15. And then we can talk about, love the scheme fit for Jalen Walker to the Falcons at 15. So Michael Williams just ran in the high 4.7s, low 4.8s at his pro day. I think that's fine. I think he's more of a power player, just over 1,000 snaps in his career and still some developing to do. He's similar to Shamar Stewart in that they are very good run defenders already. And some of the question is the pass rush productivity, but I think Michael's got a little bit more of that so far.
All right. Take it.
Cowboys at 12. A lot of needs for them as well. Wide receiver 2. Another edge. Infighting with the departing DeMarcus. Well, I guess it's not infighting anymore, but DeMarcus Lawrence departing.
Shots fired.
Shots fired between him and Micah Parsons. So Cowboys, like similar to the Niners, right? There's more going out than coming in as far as impact players go.
Yeah, well, they don't view free agency as a place to solve that. So, I mean, this is another good example of like they declared in free agency and before. I mean, they've declared this for a while. Their approach is you just tinker around the edges in free agency, and the draft is where you make the big seismic shift. So, again, who's the biggest impact player that Dallas can bring in this draft?
I mean, Jalen Walker. So Jalen Walker is interesting. He wears number 11, like Micah. Micah tweeted at him after one of the games. May have been the Kentucky game. May have been Bama. I forget. One of the games where the guy made a ton of plays, and he's like, "Oh, look at that! That number 11 can play." And now we could see them potentially going that route as the edge rusher opposite Micah Parsons, going Jalen Walker.
Definitely.
Do you have any other thoughts there?
I mean, so Gentry's gone as a running back. I don't think they would take any other running back this high. I mean, I know a lot of people think Omarion Hampton from North Carolina is running back 1 in this class. I think that's rich at this point. Barron, again, love his fit, basically any defense. I don't think that they would view him as that kind of impact player at this spot. Tyler Warren, I think they already have players that would stop that being the biggest impact he could make. You know, do they view a linebacker like Jihad Campbell at this making this much of an impact? Would they view Luther Burden as that kind of impact playmaker with their wide receiver core? not crumbling, but like losing some of its depth. It's now basically CeeDee Lamb and a bunch of other guys.
So I don't love the receivers here, but the chat, Steve in the chat brings up Matthew Golden. And that is one guy who, again, I'm a bit lower on that I think the NFL is going to start thinking about around this time because there's a 429 next to his name. I do think he could be in the mix here. I see him potentially here. I also think Jahdae Barron could be in here. Deron Bland heads into the last year of his deal. It's not in Dallas's nature to think 1 year out, but Barron could easily step into the nickel spot of Jordan Lewis. Also play outside a year from now if they let Deron Bland walk instead of paying him because they've got Diggs locked up for a few years. So I could see Barron here. Some questions about linebacker, but they just brought in Jack Sanborn and Kenneth Murray during this free agency period. So I don't know if they're going to go linebacker.
Should not be stopping you drafting a guy, though.
I understand that, but I think there's probably reasons that they brought those guys in. You know, that it's not so much that's going to keep me from doing it, but it's more so I think they did that because they have an idea they're not going to draft a first-round linebacker.
Maybe. The Cowboys are one of those teams, though, that actually have some pedigree of drafting first-round linebackers relative to other teams. Like Leighton Vander Esch went in the top 20. I mean, Micah Parsons was drafted as a linebacker before they discovered that actually the dude's the best edge rusher in his class. Yeah. Like this is a team I think that would swing at linebacker if they thought Jihad Campbell was that good.
Also suggestions about Kelvin Banks coming in. Now, where does he play for them? They have their left tackle of the future in their mind in Tyler Guyton, last year's first rounder, Terrence Steele for 4 more years. Tyler Smith is left guard. Kelvin Banks is going to come in and play right guard, battling veteran Robert Jones. I'm not sure that's the best fit for him. I kind of like the idea of Matthew Golden. I mean, I like Barron as the actual player. But as far as mixing it up a little bit, Matthew Golden, like a predictive mock here.
Dude, Golden at 12.
He's a good route runner who ran 4.29.
Right, who everyone was surprised by. I mean, he's 25 on the consensus board.
I understand that. The consensus board gets shaken up in the next few weeks because we're finishing. Draft meetings are going to wrap up. Like the player movement buzz starts over the next 2 to 3 weeks right now. And there's always players in the 30s and 20s who end up in the, teens.
Matthew Golden.
I don't think it's wild. I don't think it is.
I mean, it is wild. You're saying it's defendable, but
no, I mean, like in the predictive world, right? If we're not playing, I'm not doing it. I'm not playing GM here. I mean, for me as the GM, I'm not doing it. I kind of like the idea of Barron here, though.
I just don't think that they would believe that Barron is the needle mover for this team. I mean, if you want to shake up the mock draft, Golden is the pick.
Or the next best. Or the next edges.
Next edges.
Mike Green.
Mike Green, James Pierce, Shamar Stewart.
Beat it.
It's that trio, basically. Or Ezaraku from Boston College, if you think he sneaks into that group.
He's getting higher and higher on a lot of boards here. I'm live. Bye-bye.
Yeah, I mean, again, consensus board, Shamar Stewart is next up at 13. Kelvin Banks is 14. Michael Williams, we just drafted him. Mike Green at 16. And then Jahdae Barron, 18. James Pierce Jr., 19. That's like the guys in the top 20 that are left.
Man, I hate working together with you because we gotta come to a consensus here. It's more difficult, right? Talk through it a little bit more. It's kind of
crazy, but I kind of like throwing the cat amongst the pigeons, as they say, with the Matthew Golden pick.
All right, let's do that then.
Good. And then I can blame you.
The chat came up with it. It's the chat.
Matthew Golden, 4.29 Texas wide receiver, goes to the Dallas Cowboys.
That was children 3 and 4 running around here. That was Benny and Toby. Benny and Toby don't make a ton of appearances on the show. It's usually Harry and Teddy.
Are we getting you don't have a breakfast delivery service going with them?
No. Wife's slacking down there. Benny's usually the delivery. He does actually deliver the breakfast usually. Today was just they're getting some stuffed animals apparently. All right, who's up?
Miami Dolphins, 13. I mean, this got to be Kelvin Banks, right?
Oh, I love this. Love Kelvin Banks here. I did a Miami mock draft the other day, just yesterday. I think I tweeted it out, and I didn't mean to, but I picked 4 Texas players with my first 4 picks. I think I got Kelvin Banks, maybe Alfred Collins, Makuba the safety, and who else would I have taken? Someone else.
The Miami Longhorns.
That was the tweet. Pretty sharp, Sam. Miami Longhorns. It's just the way the board. Maybe it was Barron in the first round, but I think it was Banks. I like Banks here. Yeah.
I mean, that offensive line is still a mess on paper. Like, forget what it looks like on the field, but it's, they brought in James Daniels, who's good, but is an injury risk. Aaron Brewer at center, Teron Armstead, who's always an injury risk. Okay, Patrick Paul, who they drafted to kind of be the long-term solution then, may or may not be that guy. Left guard is still Liam Eichenberg. I think that's not good. Right tackle is Austin Jackson. That's not good. Larry Borum came over as like insurance, but that's not great. I mean, I feel not good about 2/5 of that line. Yeah. I'm really concerned about 2/5 that theoretically looks pretty good on paper. And then you've got the other 5th, the final 5th is one of the most unique players in the league in Aaron Brewer.
I like the buy low on Larry Borum. And when I say that, the buy low on these don't hit very often, but if you're going to buy low on a tackle, a guy like Borum, I think is a good one. But yeah, Kelvin Banks, I think, is a great fit here for the Dolphins.
Yeah, I think I would be surprised if they went any other way with the board like this. Done.
So, like, as you're scrolling down, like a guy like Derek Harmon is at 20 on the PFF board, and he's where the heck is he here? Still at 30. Like, that's a guy I could see going top 15 into. You know what I mean? Like, when sometimes I'm using the consensus board as a guide. But we see that all the time. A guy that's at 30 is going to go top 15, whatever it might be, especially for teams that need interior pass rush. Colts at 14 here. So I did a mock for them yesterday, too. I put Will Johnson in the first. I got conflicting feedback, right? The investment that they just made in the secondary with Travarius Ward, and then at safety with Cameron Bynum. But Travarius Ward, and then they've got these young corners.
Right.
Fine. But intrigued by locking up that position. Will Johnson opposite Travarius Ward. You got Kenny Moore in the slot. That's a really nice reshaped secondary if you're the Colts. So I'm just throwing that out there as an option just because I did it yesterday. I know this is the first place where I feel Tyler Warren's more palatable.
Yeah.
But just throwing the Will Johnson name out there. Jihad Campbell's another one, given the turnover at linebacker, that I think he has a real chance to go here. And if you look at Lou Anarumo coming in, it's not that they invested heavily at linebacker, but Logan Wilson was a big part of that defense. Jermaine Pratt, big part of that defense. I could see them wanting Jihad Campbell. Could be the first time we're really looking at linebacker, I think, in the first round.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an argument for him there. I think, obviously Zaire Franklin is there as their kind of alpha linebacker at that spot. Jihad Campbell could definitely come in and be a second linebacker. This is the first spot, though, with the Tyler Warren discussion, where not only is it like the fit, the upgrade is there, like the need is there. I mean, they don't have a tight end that you would like. It's this list of athletic freak shows that they've been drafting that none of whom have become good. Andrew Ogletree, Jelani Woods, Will Mallory, like none of these guys you wouldn't want necessarily any of them starting, let alone keeping you away from drafting Tyler Warren.
You also have the versatility that he has, taking direct snaps, running the ball. I'm always intrigued by that when you have a guy like Anthony Richardson at quarterback. Now, Richards or Daniel Jones at quarterback. When you have a run threat at quarterback like Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones, having a run threat at tight end next to your running back, Jonathan Taylor, all of that, brings some great indecision to the defense.
Just other options to stop you exposing Anthony Richardson to injury with QB sneaks.
There's so much potential in this offense. A.D. Mitchell's technically wide receiver 4 here. We know what he is capable of when him and some quarterback are on the same page.
Eventually.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate Warren here. It's a very common pick. I'm intrigued by the linebacker corner discussion, though. I also could see them not going corner given how much they just spent, but
yeah, I mean, you're not alone. Like these moves were presumably a lot of these were made before free agency affected that, but it wouldn't be crazy. But I think Tyler Warren is too obvious a pick to not be that.
yeah, we could do that. Let's do it.
Done. Now do we get God, how far do I got to scroll to get to Jalen Walker? Now do we get our Jalen Walker fit?
Again, I think Trevor and PFF lower on Jalen Walker than others. Mike Renner loves him.
Trevor hates Jalen Walker. Why does he so down on him?
I get it. Honestly, I think if I have reservations about Jalen Walker. I love versatile players as a concept. I think they're fun. Dion Jordan comes to mind for the Dolphins. He was 6'7". He could drop into coverage. He was a pretty good pass rusher. But sometimes I think versatility gets overrated. And with Walker, if you just look at his two roles in isolation, rushing the passer and playing linebacker, he's very inexperienced at both. So he's an upside play. He's gonna be more of a pass rusher at the next level. But for a defense that is going to drop players into coverage, he has that athleticism and some of that experience to be able to do that. So I think that makes him a little bit better fit for a team like Atlanta that will drop their edges into coverage. But I kind of get the uncertainty around his game because he's so inexperienced. He's just under 1,000 snaps total, and he split those snaps essentially across edge and linebacker. He's very inexperienced, and that sometimes is tough to project at the next level.
Yeah, and I would have more sympathy for that argument if it wasn't this specific draft class we were talking about, where basically all of the edge rushers have some form of massive red flag relative to normal years, right? Like if all these guys were like perfectly clean prototypes with 3 years of, 600 snaps each with consistent clean production and prototypical size and blah, 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 then yeah, like Jalen Walker would be the guy with the red flag who you're saying, he doesn't belong in this group because of these things. But like every one of these guys has got some kind of like non-conventional. I mean, even Abdul Carter, who people are saying is the best lineman or the best player in this draft, has got 1 year of production at the position that he projects at the next level. I don't care that Jalen Walker has been this hybrid player. If you just look at him as an edge rusher, I think he belongs in this conversation as one of the best edge rushes in the draft. 6'2", 245 is not prototypical for that size, but it's not like weird outlier size either. I mean, I don't see how you can drop him this far down the draft, to be honest. Not this far down. Sorry, this far down the big board.
Yeah, I really look. I get all those arguments. I love watching Jalen Walker as a player. I think there's still enough teams thinking about 3-4 outside backers as slightly different. Like, there's still some teams that want more prototypical edges, which is why when we talked about the Niners, I think they would probably want the more prototypical Michael Williams size and length than they would want from Jalen Walker. And then teams that skew more old school 3-4 outside backer teams like the Falcons here would be fine with Jalen Walker. So I think that's part of it as well. Not a fit for everybody. I'm good with him here.
Same. I get like whatever about the discussion of him at 15, 15, 16, 17. These are all teams that could use edge rushers. I genuinely don't understand having him as far down the board as 30 on a big board.
I mean, tell Trevor.
I will. Maybe I will. Maybe
call him out. Tag him. Why don't you tag him?
Well, I already called him out. I mean, this is a live show. There's 1,438 people currently listening to me call him out.
He's been called out. Go tell Trevor, like, what's your deal? Why don't you go listen to his shows, see why he hates him so much? Why do you hate Jalen Walker? Arizona Cardinals are up at 16. For some reason, I love Shamar Stewart to the Cardinals here.
Okay.
I don't know why.
That's always good.
Maybe it's because I didn't love a lot of their picks last year, and I probably wouldn't love this one, so just expecting it.
Trevor doesn't like him either.
Hey, Trevor's kind of right. He is a really violent run defender. I do love that part of his game.
So, like, this is the thing, right? This is the reason people don't like Shamar Stewart. Is that in each of his seasons he's got 2 sacks, but like he's not.
No,
I mean,
people are wait. People know pressure rates. The people know win rates. Those are awful as well.
they're not.
Okay.
Look, this is not awful. It's not great, but it's not awful.
12?
This is not a bad number.
12's not good.
It's not bad. Like this is not like that's a disingenuous argument. People are not arguing that it's not spectacular, his statistical profile as a pass rusher. It isn't bad. Like he's being lumped into a category that I don't think he belongs in. He's being lumped into this category of like athletic freak show that has never done anything, that has always completely failed to produce. And I don't think that's true if you're looking at anything beyond sacks.
His pass rush win rate the last 2 years against
Why are we doing 2 years?
Because it's better than using 1 year.
All right, but we're in a draft where everybody's got 17 snaps of career action. Like, why? What's
He's 50?
Abdul Carter average over 2 years?
Well, his will be skewed because his came from linebacker
Correct.
in 1 year. So he's 57th percentile. I don't think it's any better. 50th. It gets worse. Actually, it got worse in just 2022. His one season compared to 911 seasons among NFL prospects, 50th percentile, dead smack in the middle against all players that went on to play in the NFL. You're talking about a first-round pick.
Right. So to offset an average, not bad, but average statistical profile as a pass rusher, you've got elite athleticism and better run defending than most people that are in that category.
Let's see what. No, he has all the potential in the world. I see it. I think I see a touch more potential even maybe than Trayvon. I hate attacking Trayvon Walker. I'm looking up his final year, by the way, his pass rush win rate. See what he looks like. Taking some time to load here.
Perfect.
Violent run defender. I see the potential as a pass rusher. He's trending in the right direction. Kind of started slow in his career. I get it. I mean, I think he's going to go around this time. And I think adding that, go ahead.
And again, it's this draft class. Like, it's not, there's no Aiden Hutchinson out here who's, got like multiple years of perfect elite, getting better production and off the charts, blah, blah, blah. It's this draft class where the last guy to go has barely played either one of two different positions. The guy that's going to go at the top, presumably the edge rusher, has got one season of playing that position. Like, every one of these guys has got some form of weird red flag. If it's Mike Green, who's your favorite guy, like that dude only did it at Marshall. Like, and had it like a day at the Senior Bowl, wrecked the dude, and then was like, all right, I've shown all I need to show. Like, every one of these, nobody here has got this like perfect prospect profile that should make you go, well, compared with that, Jamar Stewart's projects as garbage.
Trayvon Walker's pass rush win rate his last year is 15th percentile.
Correct.
So you're right there. Tyree Wilson, I think, had a good final season, but he was also 23. So I'm trying to look up Tyree Wilson's last name.
This is my broad point, that I think people are lumping Shamar Stewart and Trayvon Walker together, whereas in reality, three separate things are different. Number one, we're not talking about him going number one overall. We're talking about him going somewhere in the middle of the first round. Number two, there is no Aiden Hutchinson to contrast the player with, who you are saying, well, let's take the athletic freak over the clearly superior prospect. That doesn't exist in this draft in relative terms. And number three, his pass rush profile in college was better than Trayvon Walker's. Like, those three things are all different.
To bring up Tyree Wilson, because people asked, and these are the least productive edge rushers that have gone in the first round relative to others. Tyree Wilson was a 90th percentile pass rush win rate his final season at Texas Tech. The problem was that was his only good season. I don't have his whole career here yet, but multiple seasons were not good for Tyree Wilson. There was one breakout season. He was 90th percentile, but the totality of his profile still wasn't great if you take in a bigger sample. Stewart's closer to that as well. So anyway, good discussion. We'll continue to have it as we get closer. I'm intrigued by, I agree on Ezeraku being underrated in the chat. I'm intrigued by Shamar Stewart being added to what they've just brought back in Baron Browning, added with Josh Sweat, still have Zaven Collins on the roster, then Dalvin Tomlinson on the defensive interior. They could also go Walter Nolan, interior pass rush here. but I like the idea of Shamar Stewart here at 16.
I think just spend that entire time.
Because we talked about it. I mean, yeah, they could
Done.
go Walter Nolan, Derek Harmon. They could go interior pass rush. Is that still a massive need? But is that Darius Robinson expectation from last year? They've added. So if they add a Shamar Stewart, my theory on different body types and players to block, Darius Robinson, Shamar Stewart, Josh Sweat, Dalvin Tomlinson, like they've added some bodies, man. They've added some different body types these last 2 years. Much more difficult to block defensive front.
Yeah. No, agreed. I mean, that I think it does make sense. Any kind of guy in the defensive front, I think, makes a ton of sense for them.
Appreciate everybody for being here. We take our time going through these mock drafts. It's Mock Draft Monday. If you haven't already subscribed to Check the Mic, we just got over 35,000 last week. Please be sure to hit that subscribe button if you have not already. And the thumbs up. How many thumbs up do we have? We should have at least over 1,400 right now. And I don't think we're there with all the thumbs up.
We are either.
Bengals at 17.
Have they done anything recently that would affect their draft strategy?
Add Luther Burden and just score 45 a game. Luther Burden to play the slot.
I mean, it's insane, but Luther Burden with those two would actually be an amazing receiver.
Now you're locked up for the next 4. Don't even touch receiver for the next 4 years.
Cut everybody else, and then that trio.
Tyree Wilson had a career 52nd percentile pass rush win rate, but a 27th percentile PFF pass rush grade, which is more important, and why he has not translated at the next level. Carry on.
Yet. So, I mean, with the moves that the Bengals have made, right? This locking up those two players. You've got Trey Hendrickson's deal still in flux, or Trey Hendrickson's situation still in flux. He was by far their best defensive player last year. Their move has to be basically either defender of some description, or the only other spot you could argue is the offensive line could still use work. So
you could argue safety. I mean, starting guard.
Right.
They bring back Joseph Asai. They have Miles Murphy. They're still trying to get the Trey Hendrickson deal done. And then the defensive tackle moves, re-upping BJ Hill for some pretty good money, bringing in 330-pound TJ Slayton. They don't have interior pass rush, though. So I love Walter Nolan as a fit here to complement the 330-pounders who are supposed to be, run-first type of players. I love the Walter Nolan pick, especially if they are going to lock up Trey Hendrickson. Now we're cooking maybe on this defensive line here.
Yeah. So you're right. Like it's guard or it's defender. There's a whole bunch of defensive tackles that are available in this kind of range that makes some sense. You still got, edge rusher is it's in a better spot on the defensive line. Less so if they don't get anything done with Trey Hendrickson, but if you assume he's still there, they brought back Joseph Asai. They've drafted Miles Murphy. They're probably not ready to give up on him yet. The defensive tackles, they're all basically run-first players. TJ Slayton, BJ Hill, Chris Jenkins, McKinley Jackson, like none of those guys are penetrating pass rush specialist type of defensive tackles.
I love the idea of the next group of edge rushers as well. Mike Green or Ezeraku as a fit here. I just think Walter Nolan, I'm going to make some level of assumption that they'll figure it out with Trey Hendrickson. And I'm not saying that locking up Trey Hendrickson keeps me. I would like Hendrickson plus Mike Green, right? With Asai and Miles Murphy as backups. I would love that. But they have, unless Chris Jenkins develops, they really have zero interior pass rush. BJ Hill's okay, but they really need an interior penetrator like a Walter Nolan.
And then the only other guy I would make a case for is Jahdae Barron within this secondary. I think would be great. Mike Hilton
that would be really good.
No longer there as opposed to in existence. You've got those young guys, the corners that you said were on the upward trajectory that you like, the DJ Turner, Dax Hill combination axis. That safety combination is, Geno Stone. They bought high on him, and that hasn't worked out yet. Jordan Battle hasn't dominated. Again, almost no matter where you want to put Barron in that secondary, he upgrades it. So I would make a case for that, but I think it comes down to those two, Barron or Nolan.
I'd go defensive line here over secondary. I love Barron, man. Oh man, somebody's going to get a good player in our mock draft here.
Walter Nolan has one of the widest sort of ranges of where he's projected. Somewhere
he's 26 on the consensus. I really thought he would start creeping closer to the top 10, but he has not yet.
But it's because somewhere on that consensus thing shows you like the breadth, the gap that people have him in. Some people have him as a top 10 pick. Some people have him as like a second rounder. He's got a really, really wide range of analyses on him.
Interesting.
Anyway,
yeah, I see a lot of people. I'm looking at a lot of people do have him going 17 to Cincinnati. That's one of his most common selections.
Perfect.
I could see Harmon going there as well. Remember, like I said, like Harmon as a third at 30, the more the NFL starts paying these defensive tackles, I think the more value you're going to see from Walter Nolan and Derek Harmon, maybe going a little bit higher in the draft. Most fascinating team this offseason, Seattle Seahawks.
Well, now we're back to our usual conundrum with the Seahawks, which is the interior offensive line is still a mess, and they don't like drafting interior offensive linemen in the first round.
Yeah. Who's best available here?
At least the first wave or two of free agency has happened, and they haven't addressed it there.
Now, one of the big arguments, there's two big arguments on why you don't take interior offensive linemen that high. The first one is the surplus value aspect of what you're paying. And the second aspect is you can find starters later, right? There's good guards to be had in rounds 2, 3, 4 historically. The first argument, though, I think is dwindling, right? The more Will Fries gets 5 years, $88 million, the more of those deals that happen, the less of an issue it is, much like the defensive tackle question, right? Those guys were not seen as great first-round value for a few years until they were, right? Until they start getting paid. And with the money floating around for guards and defensive tackles, you're not making that argument as much anymore. Steve Weber, that's right. That's the argument I'm trying to make. So the first part, I think, is less of an argument that it's not good value to get that starter. The second argument, I think, is still valid, right? There is this, when you look, a lot of teams go by this idea that you get your edges and your tackles in the first round, you get your defensive tackles and your guards in rounds 2 and 3, and you can, and I still think there's truth in that. So that part I'm not going to push aside, but the first one, the value aspect, though, I think is a little bit more difficult to make the way money's being thrown around.
So yeah, in Seattle's favor, they do have a lot of draft picks this year, and a lot of them are reasonably high in this draft, right? So after 18, they pick 50, 52, 82, 92. These are all picks that could be used on the interior of the offensive line. The other thing, though, is at some point, like I get why they're doing it. I think there's some sense to that. And last year was actually like a good bit of evidence to sort of back up the case, right? It's like, hey, we said you should have drafted Jackson Powers Johnson or wherever in the first round last year. You went, no, we get those guys later on, and they come back, they get Christian Haynes late in the draft. You're like, wow, we love Christian Haynes, a prospect. That's great value. Well done. Well done, John Schneider. You justified everything you said beforehand. Now, maybe Haynes will become that player, but he didn't year one, right? And it's a different team, different situation, but Jackson Powers Johnson looked a lot better year one. So number one, like there's a reason some guys go in the first round and some guys don't go until later in the draft. Number two, like at some point, even if you don't think it's value or you're leaving some sort of theoretical surplus on the table, if that's the glaring need that needs fixing, fix the glaring need, like with your best draft pick. I mean, you know what I mean? Like it's at some point, the hole on the roster is a bigger deal than the theoretical optimal strategy for constructing a roster in abstract terms. You know what I mean? This is kind of like the Bengals with their, in optimal terms, would wide receiver 2 be one of the big contracts you handed out? No, but like this is the deal that needed to be done now. So like, I think at some point you're cutting off your nose to spite your face to like rigidly adhere to this theoretical strategy of not drafting interior offensive linemen there. Well, like year after year, that's the biggest hole on the roster.
It's fair point, Sam. All fair points. Does Cooper Kupp keep you from a receiver here? 3 years of Cooper Kupp. Marquez Valdez-Scantling as your deep threat. JSN, of course. Because wide receiver could be a fit here if they do want to continue to adhere to, hey, we're gonna look at offensive linemen a little bit later in the draft. Could that be the fit?
Why? So Cooper Kupp doesn't, but the lack of, so my problem is the lack of receiver that sort of fits the hole that they have. Like, they need that classic X wide receiver, the guy that plays outside the numbers, wins downfield vertically.
Is this too early for Jaden Higgins?
That's what I'm saying. Like, of this group, the first guy that you'd be really interested in that role, I think, is Jaden Higgins. And even with our Jaden Higgins agenda, 18 overall is aggressive.
So that's so we might, receiver might be a good second wave here.
Yeah, like, so those picks that I mentioned before, they're back up again 50-52. Like, that's the kind of range where I think you could grab a wide receiver that you think may be able to play your X spot.
The other question I would pose here is Jahdae Barron as a nickel. Is that too redundant to Devin Witherspoon as as a hybrid outside nickel type of player?
Well, it's not redundant because, like, one of them plays inside, one of them plays outside, and like, it doesn't really matter that they can both do both. You just need one of them to do it.
Because that would be a fascinating secondary. Julian Love at safety already there. Kobe Bryant. So those are all former corners, hybrid type players. Then you could add a Barron and a Witherspoon, guys that could also play inside and outside, and of course Reek Woolen on the outside. What a secondary that could be! I'm intrigued by that. That would feel weird, I think, if you're a Seahawks fan looking to tick boxes as far as needs go. But they beefed up the defensive line with DeMarcus Lawrence coming in. They've added a ton of second-round edge rushers over the last couple of years. Could they go edge again? Sure. But they've beefed up the defensive line. They have massive needs at all three interior offensive line spots, but there's still free agency to tackle some of that. And you probably want another young receiver as Cooper Kupp insurance. All of that's true. Or they could add a Colston Loveland at tight end, maybe. I don't know. But, man, I'm intrigued by Barron here.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can make an argument for either Barron or Malachi Starks here, the Georgia safety. I don't think you would go for the linebackers, the defensive linemen, the corners, the wide receivers at this spot. So I think it's basically one of those DBs, or finally just go and screw it and filling the interior offensive line gaps with an interior offensive lineman. Now, Gray Zay.
Did we lose Sam? Or was that me? I'm going to continue.
I'm back.
As if it's just me.
I don't know
there
why
we go.
I don't know why I was removed in the first place, but I'm back.
You think you froze a little bit.
Where did I freeze?
Right around Gray Zabel, I believe.
Yeah. And then I said the only other spot would be the Colston Loveland pick at tight end.
Yeah. I didn't freeze there. We're good. I think it's a little high for Gray Zabel. But you're talking, like the needs. I don't know if things are fitting here with the consensus board as far as the needs. I like the idea of Barron. I'm not saying they're out of the edge market, but they could be with DeMarcus Lawrence coming in. But Mike Green is interesting there for me.
I mean, do we just think Barron is too good a value to turn down at this spot?
I think so. I would love that.
Let's do that then. Done.
Take the next pick here. My wife's calling me.
Oh, nice. Well, Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the clock rather, at pick number 19. Same players obviously available minus Jahdae Barron. The biggest need, I think, for Tampa Bay remains edge rusher. They've got some players there, but I don't think any of them are necessarily game-changing absolute forces on that defensive line. Like their best defensive player up front is still Vita Vea, frustrating though he is. You got Yaya Diaby, who was their best edge rusher a year ago. I still think this is now where the value of this first round is starting to line up. James Pierce Jr., tough to know what to do with him. The consensus, the kind of discussion you hear amongst draft people is red flags, character red flags, whether it's off field, legitimate character, work ethic type things. All of these things are potential concerns. They brought in Hassan Reddick in free agency. That's a kind of 1 year, was it 12 million, 14 million, something like that for Reddick. He's not a long-term solution. Chris Braswell is there in terms of a young player they drafted relatively highly the last couple of years. Anthony Nelson is back as well. You know, James Pierce, Mike Green, Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College, like all these players I think would definitely be in play. On the interior, you've got Vita Vea, Kalijah Kancey, they drafted recently. Secondary, pretty well set, I think. I don't know that they'd be in the Malachi Starks sweepstakes. Linebacker would be interesting. They brought back Levante David, obviously. Again, always.
I'm back by
some point.
I gave them Campbell last week. Jihad Campbell.
Yeah. So that's where I was getting to. I do think that Jihad Campbell makes some sense to them.
Yeah, he's more of a. So I think he's more of like a true outside linebacker. I don't know if that matters a ton or if that's not redundant to Levante David, but if they're too similar in skill set right now, I don't think that matters. Another edge is interesting to me, though, with Reddick on just a 1 year deal.
Yeah.
Would Mike Green be a better fit here than linebacker at this point?
I think that's where the value sort of lines up here. And I think of those edge rushers, Mike Green is probably the guy that you pick at this spot. Even though
Johnson keeps dropping
his own off-field issues.
Yeah, I'm good with Mike Green here. I think this is another one of the spots where Campbell's really in play, though. Here, and then whatever I said earlier, one of the teams.
I mean, these are all elite figures. 20 pass rush win rate as opposed to 12 that we were talking about for Shamar Stewart, like elite PFF grades of 90 plus 2 straight years. The concerns, it's the only 2 concerns for Mike Green are number 1, Marshall. So strength of competition concern. Now you can argue he solved that or answered that by going to the Senior Bowl and looking good there, but he only looked good for like a day before he was just like, yeah, I've shown what I need to show, and then bounced. I mean, you can't criticize him necessarily for it. That might be the correct strategy, but if I was like a GM looking at that, I would be wondering why. Like, what are you trying to hide if you had a good day and then left?
Nobody's trying to hide. What do you mean hide? You're trying to go out on a high note. I did my same way Quinyon Mitchell did last year.
But you're specifically, you are hiding it. Why would you not play the next 4 days if you weren't trying to hide something?
Because the problem is because it's mostly agent driven, right?
Right.
Players
the agents are trying to hide it.
No, the agents are saying go out on that. You made your point. Go out on a high note. That's why.
Right. The agent is like the next 3 days or whatever are only risk. The agents are saying that is concern. Like that, we are trying to hide the fact that you might not play this well for the next 3 days.
Hiding. It's not. Of
course it is.
It's injury risk. It's all of that.
Of course it's hiding.
It's not hiding. No, it's not. It's going out on a high note.
Hiding.
It's Costanza.
Hiding.
George Costanza. You leave on a high note. You leave when your stock is the highest. It's not hiding anything. Now you could ask, why aren't you more
absolutely hiding potentially worse play? Like you just put Josh Connor on his ass. That's all anybody's going to be talking about. We are not going to try and hide the fact that the next 3 days probably won't look like that.
Quinyon Mitchell came in, had a few good press man reps, said, hey, I told you I could do this. And he left. He said, okay, or he didn't leave. He still wore his uniform. But he said, I showed what I need to show. Mike Green showed, hey, I put dominated Josh Connolly, Oregon. There's my strength of competition questions done. One, even though it was 1 rep.
Right. I mean, I don't see how you can look at that and not say it's hiding. It is absolutely hiding.
I know you don't know Seinfeld, but it's Costanza leaving on a high note more than it is hiding. So
I don't know about that.
Anyway,
so he's got that, and then he's got some potential legal issues outside of that.
I think we should make our rule for our mock drafts. We'll go like wherever these guys land on the consensus board, we'll start considering them. So we're not playing this game of like, oh, we've got this off field. Do we just never draft him? So they're both somewhat in this range, Mike Green and James Pierce. I think this is a good pick. I like this for the Bucs.
I hate so much that that's a thing, that every like half the board we have to talk about like being what might be a dirtbag human. And I'm not saying that applies to any individual we've spoken about yet, but like we can't all just stop being assholes to each other. Like that can't be a thing.
It'd be good. I mean, it's not.
I'm drafting Mike Green. It's done.
Mike Green to the Bucs. I like that. Broncos up here at 20. Now we don't have to go tight end because they brought in Evan Ingram.
So yeah, so all is well in the tight end world for Denver.
I like Evan Ingram still. Solid tight end. I think they could go any which way. They're interesting for Jihad Campbell. I know they brought in Greenlaw, but man, a 1-2 punch there with him and Dre Greenlaw. I also think more defensive line depth all in play here. Safety.
They have a good roster.
But they filled safety with, Hufanga. Yeah, it's not elite, but it is, quote, solid across the board.
So they did bring in Hufanga. They paid him decent money. Like they've got two safeties. Neither one of them is a Malachi Starks style of safety, though. Like Starks is that free, like legitimate ball hawking, free safety with range. That's the skill set they don't have in that safety room, really.
Oh, everybody wants running backs. You're looking. This is what's going to happen, right? The mock drafts are all going to take a Marion Hampton here. They're all going to do it because you're going to say, not a need. They could take Luther Burden, like they could take a receiver for sure. No need. I'm just looking up and down the roster. No need. Running back. That's what they need. Give them the running back. That's why they kept getting linked to tight ends the whole time.
Yeah. Were you going somewhere with that?
That everybody's going to go a Marion Hampton. I'm sorry. I'm responding to the chat where everybody's saying Hampton.
No.
That's what the chat's saying.
It felt like you were going to make a counterpoint, but you just summed up that was a thing that was happening.
Yeah, well, okay. The thing that's going to happen is everybody is also going to mock a Marion Hampton here as well. And I'm fine if we're going to do this predictive thing. I honestly don't think the Broncos will go first round running back. I think they have a sharp front office that wouldn't lean that way, but I shouldn't say it like that because I think the Lions are as good as it gets. They took Gibbs at 12. I could see them taking Hampton. I'm intrigued by Campbell though, next to Dre Greenlaw.
Yeah, Campbell makes some sense. I think Starks would be interesting because I do think that's a missing skill set from that secondary. I know that they've got a lot of depth. They've got players. I don't think you're ever in a position where you're going to turn down potential rotational pass rushes if you think the guy's really good. So, I don't know that they're necessarily out of that world with Ezraku from Boston College, James Pierce Jr. from Tennessee. Those are live options. Similarly, the defensive linemen, I think, or the defensive tackles, Derek Harmon from Oregon, Darius Alexander from Toledo, I think are potential options as well. Hampton at running back makes a ton of sense. And then I do think Luther Burden is intriguing here, the Missouri wide receiver.
Yeah. I agree on Burden. That's the thing about the running back deal, right? This is why it's so tough. Like, I think there's more impact from a Burden, and I think there's more impact from even an Ezraku or a James Pierce coming in to complement Jonathan Cooper, to give you insurance if as Nick Benito heads into the last year of his contract. And you could easily say, well, they had all this. Look at all the pressure that they got last year. They don't need this guy. You always need offensive linemen. And I see the Estime discussion. Still like Estime. But they didn't give him a lot of opportunities last year. And man, I could definitely see them going running back.
Did you go back to the well with Hampton yet?
Not yet. I didn't hate him. I mean, I had two notes that I think affect the evaluation. He had more plays where he had no chance. Remember, we wanted to chart that for PFF at one point, and we never got around to it. Just the no chance plays. This play was dead upon handoff. He had more plays like that than I've seen in a while. and then just a few zone vision problems. And I may have overrated a few of them, but they seem there. Some zone vision, some gap vision problems. Setting up pullers, setting up blockers, patience. But in zone, he was pretty good. So that could get thwarted depending on the scheme that he goes to.
I think that no chance play thing would be a useful data point for both running backs and quarterbacks.
Shadur Sanders, no chance plays.
Yeah. Off the fucking charts, like insane high. Like I genuinely think that's a useful data point for both those two positions, because I think that changes behavior. Like I think the volume of those things changes the behavior on the plays where that isn't a factor.
Oh, I agree. I mean, so there's something wrong about that. Or something real about that is what I'm trying to say.
All right. So Luther Burden or Omarion Hampton. That's what we've come down to.
Go Hampton for the mock. Just for the mock.
All right. Reset time.
Yeah. After your reset, I'll tell everybody about timeline. Go get them.
Pick number 11, Michael Williams from Georgia to the 49ers. Pick number 12, Matthew Golden, 4.29 from Texas, wide receiver to the Dallas Cowboys. Pick number 13, Kelvin Banks Jr., also from Texas, tackle, goes to the Miami Dolphins. 14, Tyler Warren, tight end from Penn State, goes to the Colts. 15, Jalen Walker, edge rusher / linebacker from Georgia, goes to the Falcons. Shamar Stewart, edge rusher from Texas A&M, goes to the Cardinals. 17, Walter Nolan, the defensive tackle from Ole Miss, goes to the Cincinnati Bengals. 18, Jedi Barron, the cornerback do-it-all DB from Texas, goes to the Seahawks. Mike Green, the edge rusher from Marshall, 19, goes to the Bucks. And then pick number 20, we just did it, Omarion Hampton, the running back from North Carolina, goes to the Denver Broncos.
All right, before we get to the Steelers at pick 21, going to tell you about our friends over at Timeline. You get 10% off your order of MitoPure at timeline.com using code CheckTheMike at checkout. MitoPure is a supplement that can help you because it encourages cellular renewal. It works by promoting an essential cellular cleanup process that clears out dysfunctional mitochondria, aka your cell's battery packs. There are no supplements on the market that have better clinical research shown to be effective at targeting the effects of age-related cellular decline. With regular use, you'll feel and see the difference in the form of improved energy levels, better workouts, faster recovery, more endurance, and more. In fact, MitoPure is shown to deliver double-digit increases in muscle strength and endurance without a change in exercise. This is your year to be your best, most energized, most revitalized, so you can awaken the strength, power, and resilience already in you with the first and only supplement clinically proven to rejuvenate health at the cellular level. Again, Timeline's offering 10% off your order of MitoPure. Go to timeline.com. That's TIMELINE.com. Use the promo code Check the Mic, timeline.com, get your MitoPure. All right, man, Steelers at pick 17. It's 21.
I was going to say,
I'm losing
17. What are you talking about?
I'm losing it, man. I'm starting to lose it. We're at 2 hours and 15 minutes already.
Yeah, it's
the longest. This is the longest mock in history. I love it. We're just hanging out. It's like free agency week. Just hanging out, having some fun, mock drafting.
So
what are we doing? What are we doing for the Steelers here?
Well, free agency, right? What is it? What did it affect? Well, the Steelers still don't really have a quarterback. They brought back Mason Rudolph. Let's assume that's not their starting game plan going into the season. They are giving Aaron Rodgers some space. Are we? That's our binary. Are we assuming they get or do not get Aaron Rodgers?
I don't know if everybody appreciates my bit, but my favorite bit is quote tweeting my own tweet on Aaron Rodgers taking the next 3 to 4 months to make a decision with some sort of like cryptic message. Linkin Park lyrics seem to work pretty well to describe the Aaron Rodgers situation. I've noticed if you want to bring your best Linkin Park lyrics to the table to describe what Aaron Rodgers is thinking and going through. I think ultimately he ends up with the Steelers. I reading enough of the reports, I believe there is a little he wishes he could go to Minnesota. I really believe, because we've talked about that, right? When you're weighing the situations, it's like, man, I'd love to go to Minnesota. Look at those dudes.
Right.
Let's go play there. And I don't think Minnesota wants him. I think he lands in Pittsburgh. I think that's so let's say they have Rodgers.
Okay. So then the next question becomes, what's the best thing for Aaron Rodgers here?
Now, my next question is actually, I don't know how long George Pickens is still going to be there. I wonder if they're going to trade him. So I think receiver could be in play. And I also,
Okay.
even if he is there and you have Aaron Rodgers, the next Ibuka or Luther Burden option still works, even if you have Pickens and Metcalf, right?
Yeah. The problem is Roman Wilson basically had a redshirt year because we didn't, because of injuries. So I, I think they would be reluctant to just write him off entirely. But equally, you literally haven't seen anything that you can hang your hat on and say he's going to be an important part of this team going forward. So that's tough. But
he's a third
yeah, it wouldn't
rounder.
preclude it.
You're not saying we're definitely going to, him or Calvin Austin probably won't keep me from taking one of these top receivers if they're available.
Right. Did the Pittsburgh Steelers learn any lessons from the Najee Harris first round draft pick?
No. I mean, the only difference the only thing you could say is, hey, we've got Zach Frazier at center and paid Sayamalu at guard. They have better offensive linemen theoretically. Mason McCormick looks like a mauler for the future, and they have 2 first-round tackles in Broderick Jones and Troy Fautano. They could make the case that they have a young ascending offensive line to add the running back to complement Jaylen Warren.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately for them, in this scenario, all of the top players on the board are basically defenders, which, I mean, it's not overall bad, but just means you're probably not helping Rodgers with this pick.
The only other, Darius Slay comes in to play corner. That I don't know if that completely, it doesn't keep you out of the corner market, but I'm certainly not going to force a first-round corner here. Will Johnson would still be interesting to me, but I do believe safety is potentially in play there. Deshaun Elliott heads into the last year of his deal. Not a lot of depth beyond him. I think Malachi Starks or Nick Emenwari could be in the mix here.
Yeah, I think Starks makes a lot of sense here. Basically all the defenders I think are legitimately.
Do you take Will Johnson? Just for the
value?
think
at this point, Will Johnson's starting to become really good value.
Really good value.
I mean, I get to an extent him sliding, but he could easily still be the best corner in this draft.
Well, let's take Will Johnson then. Just the way it fell.
Boom. See, that was easy.
That was easy. Chargers at 22. Will the former Ravens front office take a first-round running back here, as many people want?
Well, we've taken the top 2 off the board for them, so that won't help. They brought in Najee Harris. Free agency. So free agency additions. Najee Harris moves the needle for them in terms of, they think they got running back 1, I would imagine. They brought in Mekhi Becton in that second wave of free agency, giving them the largest right side of the offensive line in the NFL, I would assume.
Very nice.
So that moves the needle for the offensive line. What else do they do in free agency? Dante Jackson comes in a corner.
Khalil Mack.
Retained Khalil Mack.
I would say Benjamin St. Juste at corner. So I think corner's in play because they had the 2 young players there that played pretty well. Yeah. Corner could be in play, but I really think receiver and tight end.
Receiver is still a need.
Yes. Mike Williams comes back, but Jalen Reagor comes back. They have a lot of bodies on the depth chart. I would love to see a Luther Burden complement Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnston here. But then you have the Colston Loveland Michigan connection as well. There's a James Pierce suggestion in the chat. I don't hate that either. Khalil Mack just back for the year. Youth on the edge. Also kind of like that. Are you still there? Oh, Sam just lost power. And I can't even tell. Sam lost power. It's my dream. Here we go. I'm on my own. Let's run this thing. Chargers are up. I'll take suggestions from the chat. Look at this. We don't have the actual mock draft up either, so that's going to be kind of tricky because he had it. So let me just make sure I catch up here on who's available. Barron is gone, right? Tyler Warren's gone. Malachi. So he lost power. He lost the entire mock draft. So we're going to have to replicate it. Malachi Starks is not gone. I'm going to go James Pierce or receiver here for the Chargers at 22. We got some suggestions for Luther Burden. I don't like going tight end. I don't want to go tight end here, but they missed out on the Evan Ingram sweepstakes. I would have loved to see them bring in Evan Ingram the same way the Broncos did. Then you don't have to. Then you don't have to force the tight end. I'm going to go James Pierce. I saw that suggestion and I liked it. I like James Pierce here to go with Khalil Mack for 1 year. Tuli Peloto in there as well. Give me James Pierce at 22 here for the Chargers. That puts the Packers up at pick 23. You can't follow along here necessarily, but we'll catch up. We'll get there. Make sure I got the right players here. I see Donovan Ezeraku still here for Boston College. I like that fit for Green Bay. I think they've got a certain need in the trenches here. We got to pull up their depth chart and see where we went here. So it's difficult when you're playing. I have a lot of respect for the solo podcasts. I think one of the tricks is you talk slower. You need to talk slower, and then you have to ask questions to yourself and then answer them. That's one of the tricks of the solo podcast. It makes it trickier, though, doing your research, because like when Sam's talking, I get to my research and get to the next thing. So the Packers with Rashawn Gary, Kingsley Enagbari, Lucas Van Ness, they could use some help on the edge, and I think this is clearly Donovan Ezeraku as the next pick. Pick 23 for the Packers. I'm going Ezeraku on the edge for Green Bay. Do we have we're not caught up yet on this, but we're gonna have the visual going. Sam's telling me once again. I'm on it. He's just telling me he lost power. And I'm telling him, we're going, baby. We're just going. So Packers are taking Ezeraku from Boston College at pick 23. It puts the Vikings up at pick 24. And if you look at what the Vikings did in free agency, this was helpful for a team that only has a handful of draft picks here. And they had a running back need, but they brought back Aaron Jones. They had a defensive tackle need, but they went and got both Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave. They had questions at corner. They bring in Isaiah Rodgers. They bring back Byron Murphy. So they ticked a lot of the need boxes, and they absolutely handled the interior of the offensive line with their needs as well in Minnesota. Look at Sam trying to get back here. The guard spot could still be a position of need here for Minnesota, and the value also could match with Gray Zabel potentially on the board here. Sam, how you feeling? What happened over there?
The power just turned off in my house for like 2 minutes. Just decided there's no storm, like nothing's happening. No reason for it to go. It just decided, you know what? You don't need electricity right now. I'm going to shut it all off.
Wow.
So just enough to kill everything of consequence in the house, right? Like internet, the stream, everything. Like that's all gone. But it'll be back in a minute.
This is the best show. I love it. We're having fun. I had to answer a phone call, which was an emergency, which was my wife. The tires were flat in the minivan. So my wife needed that. That was the emergency I had to handle earlier.
Got it.
She needed to figure out where to go get the tires, get some air in the tires. You lost power.
This is our own fault for like having a 9-hour-long show.
We spent 20 minutes on the Bengals. The receiver discussion at the beginning. All right. So the issue I have is I didn't keep up with the mock. If you could catch up to where we were, I took for the Chargers, I took James Pierce on the edge.
Okay. The problem is the computer died and reset itself. So I need to know what the first 20
You'll just have to remember.
Okay. So I'm going to have to redo the draft while we do this.
Nah, we'll figure it out. Do we have any notes in the chat here? We'll get it. We'll figure it out. Anyway, we have the Minnesota Vikings on the clock. And what I was mentioning was a lot of the needs that they filled in the draft. In free agency heading into the draft. Still could probably use. So they'd be an interesting team. I don't think we took Luther Burden yet. They'd be a real interesting team for Burden as wide receiver 3 for them. Boy, would that cook offensively. The other question I had was maybe left guard. Haven't solved that problem yet. They brought in the 2 Colts, Ryan Kelly, Will Freeze, and Gray Zabel could fit in at left guard here for the Vikings. Is that the way to go? Incredible pass protection week at the Senior Bowl. I like the idea of Gray Zabel here for the Vikings.
I would love Gray Zabel for them. Like, I think that clearly they made a statement this offseason that the interior, that offensive line is getting fixed in a way that it hasn't been for a while. Ryan Kelly, Will Fries, definitely upgrade that. You still have the third spot available there. I think they'd love to trade back. I don't know if they're going to get a trade partner at this spot, but if they were stuck at this position, I think Gray Zabel would be a great pick.
All right, let's do it. The one other thing I was going to ask, we have nowhere to click it.
Right.
I mentioned the Giants trading back in for a Jackson Dart. Do you want, like, with the Vikings, given all their needs, I'm sorry, their lack of draft picks, are they a good trade partner here? Do we want to have the Giants trade up with the Vikings? We don't have to ice, like, we'll assume a fair trade.
Right.
But so we don't have to play it out. Do you want to have the Giants trade up here to 24 from they're at 34, sorry, from 34 to 24 to take Jackson Dart?
I like that. That would be interesting.
Okay, we could see that. Let's really mix it up here. So Giants are going to trade up. So we talked about the Vikings. They'll get their Gray Zabel later, potentially at pick 34. They'll pick up an extra draft pick or two here. Giants will come up to pick 24, and they're going to get Jackson Dart. So the Giants now have come away with Travis Hunter at 3 and Jackson Dart at 24.
I like it.
We're just looking for a thought exercise here. We're looking for the thought exercise of the mock draft. Puts the Texans on the board at pick 25. They just paid Derek Stingley.
Yep.
Record money. Saw some Texans fans didn't love the Kalen Bullock takes, Sam. The Texans Twitter was on the attack. The one thing I just wanted to say about that, because the Texans fans are listening very closely lately. I didn't necessarily agree with you saying, like, Kalen Bullock's not going to be a starter going forward. Like, I think they'll still want him as a starter. But if I went back, I wanted to do the research. All of those times that we said that the Texans had a chance to give up like a 50-yard touchdown and the QB missed it, almost all of those were right behind Kalen Bullock in his zone, in his coverage, in whatever he was responsible for. That's Trevor Lawrence missing Brian Thomas Jr. That's Josh Allen missing Mac Jones. That's Mac Hollins. That's Mac Jones missing Brian Thomas Jr. We get dogs now too. It's the best show ever.
Dog's not happy because the power went, so she's scared.
Well, take care of her. I mean, I had my kids here. You got your dog. Whatever. That's what we're doing. We're just hanging out, mock drafting. Kalen Bullock had issues last year. I know he had the 5 picks. He had some issues on play. They never showed up because the QBs missed them. But if the QBs just hit these throws, we're talking 5, 6, 7, 50-plus yard touchdowns here. That was what we were trying to bring up in the Texans discussion. No need to discuss even more.
And there's a difference between, hey, there's some strange, look away from the microphone though. There's some differences between, like, hey, these are things that are difficult to diagnose within a secondary and who knows who's really at fault here. And, like, here's a clear screw up from a safety that what may or may not have been exploited. Yeah,
that was the only thing. That was the only issue. So I would say, given their offseason, I love where they are from a defensive line depth perspective. Offensive line certainly still needs help, and this is where I think Gray Zabel would be a good fit for them. So if you're Minnesota and you just made that trade, you probably expected maybe Gray Zabel goes off. If you really wanted him, maybe he goes off the board the next pick. So maybe we should have anticipated that. But Zabel can come in, grab one of those guard spots here for Houston.
Yeah. Again, I think their offensive line still needs to be repaired. So I would be okay with that. We go Gray Zabel with them.
Yeah, let's do that. I appreciate the chat. So the chat's just going to rehash all the picks for us, right?
Yeah. So our problem now is, I think, again, great assist, but I need like 2 minutes where I don't have to talk so I can actually go through.
Yeah, I could do that. I was on my way. I was on my way to doing that before anyway.
Nice.
So, man, I took over, man. I just took over for you, Steve podcast. So Sam's going to go catch up on the mock draft. I'll let you know what happened at 23, 24, and 25. The Rams are up at pick 26. We've been, I think, on this show. So a couple picks. I think Jahad Campbell's still on the board here. The Rams don't tend to overinvest at inside linebacker, but I love that potential fit for the Rams, especially the way they were blitzing in the second half of last season, creating pressure. I love that potentially. The other thing, I think we've been lumping the Rams in with safeties. And so Malachi Starks, I think, has been here in mock drafts for us previously. Nicky Manwari's been here previously, at least in play as a potential option here. So I think both of those guys. The tight end could be in play. Colston Loveland from Michigan for the Rams, as they've added Devontae Adams on the outside at receiver. Still could use some help and versatility at tight end. So I think both safeties. Did we do the Matthew Golden thing at 12? Was that official, Sam? Okay. Just making sure. Don't think any of the other receivers are great there.
I know I'm nodding. I'm not muted or anything. I can talk.
I just assume you're muted. This is also the first place. I think the next wave of cornerback is really interesting for the Rams here. I have to go back and watch Chavon Ravel from East Carolina, but my first watch on him was like, I get it as a top 15 pick. I get why he's potentially going so high. He's at 37 on the consensus board. Actually, the consensus, NFL mock draft database.com, does have him projected to go at 26 to the Rams in however they do those projections. I love that potential fit. Both him, Benjamin Morrison, those guys that are dropping quite a bit. And I do think a few of them end up in the second round, some of these injured corners or second wave of corners. Chavon Ravel from East Carolina, though, I like as an option for the Rams. So I'm going to debate through the secondary here. Malachi Starks, Nicky Manwari, or cornerback for the Rams. Cornerback being Ravel.
Yeah, I mean, I think their back seven definitely needs some significant work. So I think that's definitely an area I would be targeting for them.
We didn't take Campbell yet, right?
I don't think so.
It's one of those, like, if I was the GM, I would absolutely consider him. But if we're trying to predict a little bit of what the Rams could do, like I said before, they go into the season with unknown linebackers and have little problem with it. And they've had good defenses for the most part. So look, we've said before, they have the two Camerons at safety. I like Ravel at corner. I think that gives them a really good value here at pick 26.
All right. I say do it.
Let's go. Chavon Ravel, East Carolina, 37 on the consensus board. He goes first round here to the Rams. Puts the Ravens up on the clock at pick 27. I think the Ravens could go corner again as well. We've talked about that a little bit as far as Nate Wiggins last year. They got him in the first round. Brandon Stevens is out. The Ravens could be a team to draft corner in the first round, maybe back-to-back years. Both of those safeties that we've talked about, their versatility, Malachi Starks. Is Ardarius Washington back? Or is he not back? So I think corner's in play. Safety, just for the versatility. You have Kyle Hamilton. You might have Ardarius Washington back here. I think both of those guys are interesting. Interior pass rush also could be something with Derek Harmon here, Darius Alexander, their versatility. I think somewhere on the defensive side of the ball makes sense here for the Ravens.
Yeah, it's a team. They don't have a ton of holes. It's like depth and upgrades, really. Like they could go in a variety of different places, but I don't think they have a massive glaring need anywhere. They brought in DeAndre Hopkins. That was something that potentially changed what they would do in free agency. Bateman is their number one receiver. You've got Zay Flowers, who's that slot gimmick, yards after the catch guy, the horizontal weapon, and then DeAndre Hopkins, if he can be, a high-end possession dude opposite Bateman, like that. And then the debate you speculated that they could trade away Mark Andrews, but for the moment, he's still their number one tight end. Even without him, they've got Isaiah Likely. So offensive skill position wise, I think they're really set now.
They picked up Mark Andrews' option, so he's back, still tradable if they wanted to. I don't know why they were trying to get out from Mark Andrews, to be honest.
Right. Other than costing them that's harsh, but All right, talk me through. I think we're almost back in action here. I'm back to pick number 22, which was the Chargers, which is when I died.
All right, you died. I picked James. I went edges. James Pierce
Okay.
at 22 to the Chargers.
Got it.
Donovan Ezraku, BC,
Got
to
it.
the Packers at 23. The Vikings traded with the Giants.
Yes, there's where we get tricky.
Giants traded up to get Jackson Dart. Don't worry about the draft compensation.
I just got to do it.
Will it show up in the graphic though? It might show up in the graphic, so you might want to make it legit.
Okay, oops, hang on.
Try to make it legit.
Okay, well, I'll just give him next year's first rounder.
What? Next year's first rounder? That's how desperate.
That's what it takes. Don't blame me. Blame the market.
To move up 10 spots. And then the Texans took Gray Zabel.
Don't hate the player, hate the game. For the trading up for Jackson Dart, who's the fourth quarterback on the board, according to the PFF big board.
Don't mock it, Sam.
I'm not mocking. I'm just clearly stating facts. Right, Texans
Gray Zabel. Shavon Ravel for the Rams.
Okay, and then if I share my screen, we should be pretty much back in action.
I like Malachi Starks or Nick Ebenwari as options.
See, even a power cut can't take us down. Now it could if it happens again.
Look at this. We're back. We're back. We're closing in on 3 hours. This is going to be the best mock draft of all time. We need more thumbs up for all the trouble.
Repopulate.
Yeah. Thank you, chat. Thank you, everybody. All right. Do you want to go Malachi Starks here for the Ravens? Oh, would they go Jahad Campbell at linebacker?
Either one is a nice fit.
Yeah, let's go Campbell. I forgot that he's on the board here. Man, go Campbell.
Done. Lions.
That was quick. Lions here. Bring in DJ Reed at corner. I know you at times wanted to pair him or pair the Lions with another corner here just to make sure that position's taken care of. But I like that.
Yeah.
DJ Reed comes in. They already have Terrion Arnold and Ness Rakestraw from last year.
Yeah. So I think that's a really nice move for them. Probably keeps them out of the first round cornerback market. Arnold was there. Rakestraw, I assume they still like after a year. Neither one of those guys dominated, but I don't think you would write them off after a year. Reed comes in, just solidifies that spot. Amik Robinson's back coming off the injury. Safety, you got Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph, so I don't think they'd be in the Malachi Starks ballpark necessarily. Where would you go? Would they attack the offensive line still just to future-proof and replenish?
They could. I mean, the only real question is Christian Mahogany, who just has a small sample of good play, stepping in at right guard.
Well, yeah. I mean, you've got Christian Mahogany, who's, small sample size and sort of young. You got Graham Glasgow, he's okay. He's not great. And then Taylor Decker, who's getting on in years. Like, at some point, that's a future-proofing deal if you thought that was value. Like, so, for example, Josh Simmons, the tackle from Ohio State, coming off a knee injury, I mean, that's the perfect sort of roadmap to we could bring him in. Taylor Decker's there. He doesn't need to play year one. But then we have a Taylor Decker heir apparent going forward. I'm not saying they will, but this is the sort of fortunate position you're in if you're Detroit and you have filled major weaknesses going into the draft that you can make a pick like that.
The biggest actual need, though, is still edge. I don't know where the value is at that spot, given what's still available here. Guys like Ezraku, I kept giving to them. Yeah. I get what you're like. The Simmons one's interesting, but he's the only guy that's probably like a pure tackle. Where if you got a Tyler Booker, he has a chance to start maybe right away. But the next edge is Nick Scourton at 36 on the consensus board. You've got Scourton at 36, Landon Jackson, Jack Sawyer. Some of those guys feel more like Scourton could be a first round pick. He's been as high as 15 on the consensus board, just didn't have as much production at Texas A&M last year as people expected.
Right.
But they brought, bringing in some sort of edge presence to compete with Marcus Davenport, Josh Paschal. I mean, that could be the play here. A guy like Scourton.
It's definitely, I would say it's their biggest area of need, but not necessarily a need that they need to force in round one. Now, problem is they pick at the bottom of these rounds because they've been good. So the next pick is 60. So you are waiting a while to come up again if you're the Lions. But I don't know. I would be intrigued. Scourton's definitely on the table. I would be intrigued by the Josh Simmons thing because they have that rare luxury of being able to sit him and really get him healthy coming off that knee injury. I don't think
they have Decker for 3 more years right now, and Sewell for 5, obviously. So I mean, I just don't know when Decker, like if they think, I mean, if you knew Decker's got 1 or 2 more years left, maybe. I just don't know that we know that.
Right, but it's Sewell, at least, prime was wow, Taylor Decker's really only 31.
Yeah, I think he was young when he was drafted.
That's crazy. All right, maybe not. Never mind then. I thought he was like 4 years older than that.
The only other thing to consider is if they went receiver too.
Yeah.
We were talking about all of the players. I was trying to mention the players that they drafted just in the 2022 draft that eventually need to get paid. I wasn't like the other day we were listing all of the players who need to get paid at some point and didn't mention Jameson Williams. We didn't mention Kirby Joseph. There's a lot of players who need to get paid very, very soon. So do you future-proof receiver? Like at some point you can't pay everybody. Do you get the next receiving option here?
Yeah, receiving, or if that's what you're looking for, basically guys to stop you having to pay somebody, right? So like Malachi Starks doesn't start for them right now, but maybe he allows them to move on from somebody in a year or two's time instead of paying them the big money.
I like that as an
like Kirby Joseph, I think, is going into the last year of that contract. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Starks, like I don't think Starks starts over Kirby Joseph, but maybe he allows them to not pay Kirby Joseph this time and move on and get cheaper.
I'm good with Starks as best player on the board here.
Yeah, right. Plus value.
Yeah. Let's do that for the Lions.
Let's do that. Starks is becoming, he's this fascinating guy now. He's becoming the poster child for like the miles per hour at the combine thing, which is sort of it's like a new thing in terms of using it as content and putting it out there and putting it on the TV and stuff. Like Starks basically set the highest miles per hour figure during all of the on-field workout drills. So not the 40-time sprint, but like when he's doing the workout sort of, the flip your hips, run, get out, high point the ball, all that kind of stuff. Like Starks is the guy that had the highest miles per hour figure during those things. So it's like he's actually showing the functional football drill stuff at a really high rate, plus the ball skills, plus the playmaking ability. That, like, he's becoming the poster child for the guy of like, forget what his 40 time is. When he actually does football moves, the mile per hour figure is off the charts.
Right. We have all this other information. I think it'll be interesting once we have more of that information to see what actually we should look into as we have more combine data.
Yep.
Like speed drills. Commanders are up. Pick 29 here. Is this 29?
Yes, it is.
What did the Commanders do in free agency that would keep them? Well, it was more so the trades. So they're out of the left tackle market. Laramie Tunsil with the trade. Debo Samuel in a trade at receiver certainly helped there. De'Ami Brown out in the receiving corps, but they also brought back Noah Brown. And then, we know they traded for Marshawn Lattimore last year, bring in Jonathan Jones, drafted Mike Sanders still. So it looks like a pretty good trio at corner there. And then, maybe some questions. They brought back more depth pieces on the defensive line, Cleveland Farrell, Dietrich Wise, those types. Farrell comes back, Dietrich Wise comes in to add depth on that defensive line.
And they made that
Javon Kinlaw.
Yeah, the confusing Javon Kinlaw move.
So they brought in a lot of pieces. I think that, that helps some of the glaring needs, so to speak. I see some people already pushing for a Nick Emanwari there. I like that as a potential fit at receiver at safety.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a potential fit for them.
Colston could be in play here too.
Colston Loveland is still on the board, right? They have Zach Ertz. They brought back Ben Sinnott, who they drafted recently. Yeah. But would either of those guys necessarily keep you away from Colston Loveland if you thought he's value at this point? Maybe. I'm just looking at the top guys on the consensus board that are remaining. Loveland is the top guy. Josh Simmons, who we talked about a second ago. Tyler Booker, the offensive guard from Alabama, at 22. Emanwari, the safety from South Carolina with the insane combine, 27. Emeka Ibuka, the receiver from Ohio State, at 28. Burden, 29. and then a couple of those defensive tackles.
Defensive tackle, I was going to say that could be interesting, but they paid Kinlaw, have Daron Payne, Johnny Newton from last year.
Yeah.
I think Scourton could be a fit there on the edge to add some more depth. I think Scourton or Eamon makes sense here for Washington. The other thing, they brought back Andrew Wiley. You can move Brandon Coleman, who's playing left tackle for them down the stretch. They've got some versatility maybe on the offensive line, but if they had the right guard prospect there, they could still use an upgrade. But I don't know if the values fit a fit right here.
Yeah, they're in a weird spot where they've got like a lot of bodies penciled in, but a lot of guys that I think could be fairly comfortably upgraded on if they actually found a player. So it's in a weird spot where you're like, oh, they're not going to draft this player because they've got like these two guys there. Like, yeah, but are either of them actually that good?
Yeah, that's the spot where they're at from a roster perspective. I like Eamon as a player, though. I do think he'll be in the first round, and probably needs to fit in here somewhere.
I think that's their closest thing to a true need, and that's just kind of a fun pick. I like that.
It's a fun pick. Eamon to the Washington Commanders. Bills at pick 30. Look, Bills have pick 30 and then 2 second-rounders. And going into free agency, I was of the minds that they are the classic team to double up on defensive line. But they brought in a whole bunch of defensive linemen during the draft, during free agency. Two of which
got suspended.
2 of whom are suspended. Michael Hoyt and who else is suspended? Larry Ogunjobi. Both 2 free agents suspended for the first, 6 games?
Yep.
But 1 year, look, again, 1 year of Joey Bosa doesn't keep you from drafting a defensive end. But they've got some good depth on this defensive line right now. I still think it's going to be a need, and that's something they could look at. I think Derek Harmon remains interesting here to go with Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, Ogunjobi.
Yeah.
Defensive line, I think, could very much be in play for the Bills, and also they were in the Asante Samuel market, and I don't know what ends up happening there, but they could use a starting corner as of right now.
Yeah, they traded away Kyer Elam, who had been buried on the depth chart anyway. Christian Benford is a really good starter for them. Outside of Benford, though, it's pretty weak. I think corner makes a ton of sense. And then I think the pick that we keep giving them, our Higgins propaganda, still makes sense for them.
Well, does it? They brought in Josh Palmer.
I don't think Palmer, that's the thing. I don't think Palmer, like the Bills are on like a quest to do anything except to get a traditional X wide receiver.
I think it's more just the vertical threat of Palmer. I think this also says Coleman's playing X and Palmer's the deep threat playing the Mac Hollins, Gabe Davis role, and Khalil Shakir's in the slot with Curtis Samuel.
Yeah.
In the tight ends.
I mean, corner is the biggest need on this team.
It is as of right now. Yeah. What's left here? Corner. I'm not as high on
from Ole Miss, Maxwell Harrison from Kentucky, Darian Porter, who had the insane combine from Iowa State.
So Amos is one of those guys. That was one of those, like, I was early on him, but then I don't want the hype to get too high. Like, good with him in the second. Like, I was early on Amos, and I'm like glad I found him back when he was at like Louisiana. But I don't know if he should be in the first round or not. Azariah Thomas, we put in the first round for the Chiefs. I think that's more of like a man coverage scheme fit, but they might not need that anymore. I don't know if I'm as high on Maxwell Harrison as others in the workout that he had, but he's also a pretty common pick here to Buffalo. And we might, from a predictive standpoint, could end up being the right match here.
I mean, the defensive tackles are the guys getting all the love. Again, a chunk of that's going to be pre-free agency. So it's going to be
all pre-8, yeah.
Before, the Larry, but again, like Larry Ogunjobi should not be changing whether or not you draft a defensive tackle in the first round.
If my goal is to beat the Chiefs, if I'm the Bills, Derek Harmon might give the best. Derek Harmon and Darius Alexander, that interior pass rush to go with Ed Oliver, to go with the edge rush that they have, just continue to attack from a pass rush perspective. I think that is probably the way to go. Now, you're going to, assuming the corner is going to get figured out, like they could go Asante Samuel, they'll figure out corner, like there's an assumption there. But I think the interior pass rush makes a lot of sense here.
Yeah, and you've got more picks come back, right? They've got, after this pick, they've got pick 56, pick 62, 109, like they can get a corner after this pick.
I think those corners that you mentioned, Benjamin Morrison from Notre Dame, Trey Amos, Darian Porter, that chunk, I think one of those guys is there for their second round pick.
Right.
One of their 2 second rounders.
Yeah. I like Derek Harmon. I think that's
let's go Derek Harmon. Let's do it.
Do that. Kansas City.
Now, Kansas City, Josh Simmons is on the board here. Is that their next developmental left tackle?
But he would be so absent the injury, he would be of a higher level than the guys they've been targeting the last few years in this kind of same spot, right?
Right. Yes, and
I actually kind of like that.
He's dropped for us in this mock for whatever. It's just the way it's fallen today.
Right. Now, the propaganda out there is like teams are not concerned about his knee injury and he's not going to drop at all. They're going to draft him just as if he was healthy. So if that's true, he's a steal at this point.
We didn't take him anywhere, right? The chat's questioning. I don't think we took him anywhere.
No.
We discussed him. I'm good. Yeah, take Simmons.
Simmons would be, so they have the luck that they can now play Jalen Moore, who was the free agent signing that they brought in $15 million a year off a pretty small sample size of play that's high level. You can play him right away, and you also have the contingency of Simmons then maybe being a solution long term if he doesn't work out. That would be intriguing. They've also, this is Travis Kelce's now 182 years old and dating a superstar pop star. Who knows how much he really cares about football anymore. Colston Loveland's on the board. Mm-hmm.
By the way, I don't know if I'm going to be as high on Simmons as everyone else. He's progressed well. Half a year of pretty good production at Ohio State. I feel like that would be the play, but you probably have that tight end discussion that you just had. That has to be at least a discussion for the Chiefs here.
Right, particularly because I think for the first time there's like clear evidence that Travis Kelce isn't quite what he used to be. Like,
right.
Previously, you could at least make the case of, hey, yeah, he started the season slow, but he turned it on the postseason. And that was still vintage Kelce. Now it's like even the lasered in focus version of Travis Kelce looks like a diminished force. So I think you can definitely make the case that if Colston Loveland's on the board at this point, it's value.
I'll say it this way, though. If the board falls this way, I think they have to take Simmons. Jalen Moore is not necessarily a long-term play at left tackle. It also might give you the flexibility to walk away from Jawan Taylor at some point. So I think you have to go Josh Simmons here.
All right, done.
Eagles at 32.
So then the annual, how did the NFL let Howie get is?
I mean, it's easy to say like Luther Burden maybe. Right. I know a lot of people are expecting Dallas Goedert to be off the roster sooner rather than later. So Colston Loveland's in play. For me, though, it's probably Darius Alexander to replace Milton Williams as the interior pass rush threat.
Okay.
There's not a name here. There's not like Georgia player that should have gone mid-first round that's still available here, though.
Right. No, but I think if they drafted either, and this is why it's crazy, there's two of them. If they drafted either Luther Burden, the Missouri receiver, or Colston Loveland, the Michigan tight end, assuming Dallas Goedert is going to get moved at some point, if they drafted either of those guys, I think you would hear a chorus of, how he does it again.
Yeah,
look,
no, I get it.
Like Luther Burden, a year ago, Luther Burden was like a guy being talked about in the top 10, and then he had like a down year. Quarterback play was garbage. He didn't produce as well. And now it's like, now he goes with the final pick of the first round. I mean, Luther Burden's got skills, like serious skills and projection.
How did we let him fall?
Yeah.
This happens every year though, Sam. You get one of my favorite days is the Friday after day one. And you're sitting there and you're like, look at all these guys that we had in the first round available in round two. Right. There's always these names. So you get to the end of the mock and you see this.
Sure. I'm not saying it's crazy. I'm just saying it would be, that would be why you go that kind of chorus.
I just don't know if they go wide receiver 3 over an interior pass rusher like Darius Alexander, especially given what went out the door and what they need to replace. I just think they have to go back to the trench well with their first 2 or 3 picks here.
All right. For the sake of ending this 9-hour show, I'm willing to put Darius Alexander in there.
We did it. 3-hour mock draft. No more breaking news on mock draft Mondays. Just can't have it. Look at that mock.
Download.
It's a perfect mock. Okay, so it doesn't show the trade there, so that's good. Yeah, it just has. That's going to be good. Just put it out. Put it out onto Twitter right now. Context free. See how many people notice that the Giants come in at 24 to grab Jackson Dart. It'd be great.
Perfect.
Appreciate everybody for being here for the full 3 hours. Thanks for sticking with us between emergency, tire issues, dogs, babies, and losing power. We did it all in just over 3 hours now.
Most of those were connected, unfortunately.
Round 2.
Like the dog was only a factor because the power went out. Otherwise, she was sitting perfectly happily on the couch until the power went out and the dog got scared.
We're going to try to get the great Mike Renner on a little bit later this week. Might have some. Are we going to do QB rankings this week or next week? Do we figure it out? Just be ready. They're coming out soon.
I'm good with either.
I think I want more time. We'll try for next week. Send in your emails. What's the email address again? Check the mic.
Check the mic at the33team.com.
Definitely good to ramble on some email draft questions. Check the mic at the33team.com. Send those in. Maybe we'll touch on those on Wednesday. Thanks to everybody for
the chat there was asking, will we have Mike on live? Mike can't do live because his CBS show is on during the time that we're doing there. But I think we can. Yeah, but we can hopefully pre-record and then send it as live, so it will appear in the same place and it will be as if we were live here.
Let's do that. So you can also email your questions in for Mike. We're going to try to record with him Wednesday for Thursday. So send in your questions. We can try to get those to him, or we'll answer them on Wednesday. Either way, do the email. And we'll be live again Wednesday and Thursday, 10:30 a.m. this week. So thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again Wednesday with more Check the Mic.